Chapter 1387. You are an incompetent physician. Given Elder Liao's current condition, it was clearly infeasible to have him stand up and execute a punching routine. The fastest way was to knock the other party and analyze him through the Library of Heaven's Path as an artifact. Previously, he could still rely on medicinal herbs to knock others out, but that would not work on a Saint 7 Dan expert like Elder Liao. Utter nonsense. Before Elder Liao could say a word, Divine Healer Bai Yu had already lashed out furiously. As the head of the Sanctum of Sages Physician Guild, he had a deep understanding of the various diagnosis methods out there, and this was inclusive of those eccentric and unorthodox ones. But one that required the patient to be knocked out. Pardon his ignorance, but he had really never heard of something like that. Once a person was knocked out, there would be some deviation in their metabolism and other internal functions. While it was still possible to examine external injuries, it would be hard to analyze the internal traumas that the patient was afflicted with in such a state. So, for the young man to ask to knock Elder Liao out right from the start, just what the heck was he up to? How about it? Will you knock yourself out, or should I do it instead? Paying completely no heed to the raging Divine Healer Bai Yu, Zhongxian looked at Elder Liao with a compassionate smile. Elder Liao also doubted the existence of such a diagnosis method in the world, so he instinctively turned to Divine Healer Bai Yu with a confused gaze to seek confirmation. Forget it, I'll just do it myself then. Noticing Elder Liao's hesitation, Zhongxian decisively raised his hand and chopped down toward the top of Elder Liao's head. Hula! The surrounding air swiftly compressed together, making breathing highly difficult. Just as Zhongxian's chop was about to reach the other party's forehead, he abruptly pulled his hand back. Poof! A short but resounding sonic boom echoed, and Elder Liao immediately fainted. That is, the air compression spirit clearing art? The secret art that not even 8-star physicians are capable of pulling off. Divine Healer Bai Yu's eyes narrowed in shock. Air compression spirit clearing art? Fei Shi asked in incomprehension. There are some injuries and illnesses that the treatment process is simply too difficult for those lacking in mental fortitude to bear. Thus, in order to prevent any unnecessary complications during the treatment, it would be best for the patient to be knocked out. However, regardless of whether it's the use of anesthesia or any other means, it would leave a certain degree of damage to the patient's body. This air compression spirit clearing art makes use of a sonic boom resulting from the movement of one's palm to stimulate one's primordial spirit, forcing one to lose consciousness temporarily. It goes without saying that the ability to knock out a patient without causing any damage to his physical state can make a huge difference to patients who are already in a critical state and cannot take any more trauma. For this reason, most physicians would seek to learn it even though it's a demonic tune in the strictest of sense, but unfortunately, it's an extremely difficult skill to master. Even I am still unable of performing it, but who would have thought that that fellow over there would be able to pull it off? At this point, a hint of doubtfulness surfaced in the eyes of Divine Healer Bai Yu as he asked, could it be that he's a highly skilled demonic tunist too? On the other hand, seeing that Elder Liao has been knocked out, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He placed his fingers on the other party's pulse once more. Wang. A book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path, and he quickly flipped it open. With just a look, his eyebrows immediately began twitching wildly. He turned to the elder behind him and lashed out furiously. You incompetent physician, will you only be happy after you treat Elder Liao to his death? What did you say? Divine Healer Bai Yu's face darkened upon hearing those words. Hailed as the Divine Healer in the Sanctum of Sages, putting aside managerial elders, even the top elders would have to address him respectfully. Yet, this fellow actually dared call him an incompetent physician. The burning rage within him nearly caused him to blow up on the spot. Hong Long. Unable to control his temper, a terrifying aura immediately gushed forth from him, plunging the surroundings into the midst of winter. Everyone's body immediately stiffened. Saint 8 Dan Pinnacle. An expert of this caliber could already be considered one of the top figures in the master-teacher continent. Unfazed by the pressure from Bai Yu's aura, Zhongxian bellowed, are you really unaware of what I am saying? If you don't know how to treat Elder Liao, just keep your hands off him. To think that you would call yourself Divine Healer. More like Goodbye Healer, you. Seeing the deep disdain in the young man's eyes, Divine Healer Bai Yu felt a feeling so suffocating in his chest that it felt as if he would explode. He had never been humiliated in such a way. He glared coldly at Zhongxian before forcefully reining his power back in. Flinging his sleeves coldly, he said, "No matter what your background is, if you can't give me an explanation that I am happy with today, don't blame me for getting physical on you." Those who were qualified to enroll in the Sanctum of Sages usually came from illustrious backgrounds. As angry as Divine Healer Bai Yu was, he still did not dare make a move recklessly. "You still want me to explain to you?" Zhongxian shook his head and snorted. He turned his gaze to the fainted elder Liao and abruptly raised his leg and kicked the latter's head. "What are you doing?" Divine Healer Bai Yu roared in shock. Given how the strength and speed behind Zhongxian's kick, if it were to hit, elder Liao's face would explode on the spot. "Are you insane? You are here to treat, but first, you knocked out your patient, then you went ahead to berate me, and now, you are even attempting to murder your patient. You really need to get your head treated." "Hula!" Divine Healer Bai Yu rushed forward and flicked his hand, creating a ripple through space with his power of dimension sundering, thus successfully deflecting Zhongxian's attack. "Get this hindrance out of the way." In the face of Divine Healer Bai Yu's impediment, Zhongxian raised his eyebrows and flicked his wrist. Divine Healer Bai Yu was slightly startled by Zhongxian's words, and before he could even process what was being said, his heart suddenly jolted in fear. "Hula!" A netherworld azure dragon beast suddenly materialized right before everyone's eyes, and a thick tail swept right in Divine Healer Bai Yu's direction. "You!" Before Divine Healer Bai Yu could even react, he was struck squarely in his shoulder. An intense pain assaulted him as he was sent flying backward. He was in the same cultivation realm as the netherworld azure dragon beast, but the latter was still more powerful than him due to its innate dragon bloodline. On top of that, its appearance was too sudden, so he was caught off guard, causing him to suffer a setback right from the start. "You bastard!" Divine Healer Bai Yu snarled with a livid expression. He immediately prepared himself to dash forward once more, but before he could make a move, the netherworld azure dragon beast was already before him. Despite its massive physique, the movement of the netherworld azure dragon beast was as swift as a bolt of lightning. Its enormous claws tore sharply through space, falling down upon him. Given the speed at which the claws were moving, Divine Healer Bai Yu knew that he would not be able to evade on time, so he clenched his fists tightly to face the attack. Hong long long. The collision between the two experts caused a turbulent shockwave to ripple into the surroundings. The transparent barriers that shielded the individual dueling rings from the surroundings wavered non-stop, flickering in and out of existence, as if they would succumb to the pressure and shatter. At the same time, conspicuous spatial ripples could be seen spreading outward, forcefully pushing the crowd back. What is happening? Why did that saint beast suddenly appear out of nowhere? Fei Shuo, Feng Zi, and the others were dumbstruck. Were they not in the midst of treating Elder Liao? Why would they suddenly start fighting one another? Furthermore, the netherworld azure dragon beast was obeying Zhongxian's command, so it should be his tamed beast, right? But how in the world did he manage to tame a Saint 8 Dan beast in the first place? A tamed beast can be considered a beast tamer's strength as well. If I had really challenged Zhongxian earlier, I would have been tragically defeated. Zhong Yu felt cold sweat pouring down his back. At this moment, he felt deeply thankful that Feng Zi had spoken up before he did. Otherwise, just a claw from the netherworld azure dragon beast would have been sufficient to spell his death. The inceptive sage of the Spirit Awakener Hall, pummeling Zhong Chun and Zhong Feng, subduing Feng Zi with a single sword art, berating Divine Healer Bai Yu without any hesitation, and bringing out such a powerful saint beast in public. Previously, Zhong Yu had thought that Zhongxian was an extremely low-profile person, but from the looks of it now, it seemed that he just did not know the latter well enough. There was probably no one as high-profile as him. In fact, even most high-profile individuals would only cause a commotion every now and then, but this fellow was inciting incidents one after another, as if he would not be content until he was constantly at the forefront of everyone's mind. To think that he had even thought that that fellow was unworthy of his notice at one point in time. Even if he had viewed that fellow as his rival, that fellow might not even think that he was worthy of his attention. The gap between the both of them was simply too great. Shaking his head helplessly, he turned his gaze to the young man not too far away once more, only to see that the latter was not paying any attention to the battle in the sky. Instead, he was looking at Elder Liao with a hint of viciousness in his deep, black eyes. "Time to begin," the young man muttered. "Hoo-la." He raised his leg once more and aimed it right toward Elder Liao's head. Peng! It landed on the latter's head, and in an unconscious state, the latter did not have the slightest ability to retaliate at all. He was sent flying right off the stretcher, smashing right through one of the walls of the dueling rings. This. Zhong Yu's lips twitched. Just what kind of grudge did he have with Elder Liao? Or rather, what in the world was Zhong Xian up to? He should have known that he would never get out of the sanctum of sages alive if he killed Elder Liao. While overwhelmed with shock, Zhong Yu saw Zhong Xian rushing over in Elder Liao's direction, and before the latter could even land on the floor from the previous kick, his leg whipped forth once more. Peng! As if a football, Elder Liao flew into the air once more. It was hard to tell whether it was an intentional action or not, but the direction that Elder Liao was flying toward happened to be where Physician Bai and the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast was clashing. Both parties were pitting their full might against one another, causing an insane amount of power to ripple into the surroundings. Even ordinary half-Saint 9 Dan experts would not dare get close, let alone the unconscious, Saint 7 Dan Elder Liao. Before he could even come close, the might was already beginning to ravage his body, threatening to tear him to shreds. "It's over." Fei Shi nearly collapsed to the ground from the sheer horror of what he was seeing. Given how intensely the two experts were clashing with one another, unless a Saint 9 Dan expert were to intervene in the battle, it would be impossible to stop them. Fei Shi knew that even he would lose his life if he got involved at this point, much less the unconscious Elder Liao. Liao Xin. Not expecting Zhong Xian to make such a move either, Divine Healer Bai Yu was appalled. However, he had already released his full might, and it was too late to retract it now. No matter how he shouted, it would not make a difference. Wang. Just as everyone thought that Elder Liao was doomed to die, a light buzz suddenly sounded from his body, and the frost shrouding his body abruptly expanded outward, forming a sphere of mist that extended for a radius of 3 meters. After which, the sphere began to surge upward, forming something that was reminiscent of a giant lotus flower. The overwhelming power between the clash of might of Divine Healer Bai Yu and the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast struck the lotus squarely, and astonishingly, even though it wavered slightly, it was not destroyed at all. As such, the unconscious Elder Liao did not sustain any damage. It seemed like the lotus had saved his life in this desperate moment. Upon seeing that, Divine Healer Bai Yu and the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast were startled for an instant. The clash of their strengths was strong enough to cause even the massive protective formation cast over the Hall of Propriety to waver, and yet, a mere lotus that sprouted from Elder Liao was actually able to neutralize their attack entirely. Just what in the world was it? Now, as if having expected this situation, Zhong Xian flicked his wrist and took out the pinnacle spirit stone that Luo Xianqing had given him previously. Holding it tightly in his left hand, he began furiously absorbing its energy. Hong long long. Concentrated spiritual energy surged into his body, swiftly filling up the depletion he had sustained previously. Then, he lifted his right hand and tapped forward. Sai La. The Lingshu sword abruptly burst forth to strike down upon Elder Liao. In the midst of its movement, the sword chi imbued within the Lingshu sword extended to over several dozen meters, as if attempting to sever the world into two. Puha! The sword cut down on the lotus shrouding Elder Liao, and shockingly, the seemingly invincible lotus actually began shattering like a mirror. How is this possible? Divine Healer Bai Yu was stunned. Even the combined might between him and the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast was insufficient to destroy the lotus, and yet, the other party managed to cut it apart with just a surge of sword chi. Could it be that the young man was even stronger than him? Perhaps even reaching Saint 9 Dan? Chapter 1388. Treating Elder Liao. After a moment of shock, Divine Healer Bai Yu swiftly came to a realization. It was not that the young man was far stronger than him or anything else. Rather, the lotus was already left on the verge of shattering after the combined attack between him and the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast, and the young man had aimed his attack at the very opening of the lotus. Because of that, he was able to destroy the lotus with a single strike. Nevertheless, it was still an extremely formidable feat. Even he had not managed to find the opening of the lotus that had appeared out of nowhere yet, but the young man was able to see right through it, even accurately striking down on it from afar with his sword Qi to destroy the lotus, not harming Elder Liao in the slightest. It had to be said that his eye of discernment and control over his strength had reached an astonishing level. While Divine Healer Bai Yu was feeling deeply impressed by the young man's feat, he lowered his head to look at the young man, only to see that the latter did not show the slightest hint of joy at having sliced apart the lotus. Instead, there was a tight knot between his eyebrows, and his face was slightly pale. What's going on? There's something bizarre about the lotus. Just as Divine Healer Bai Yu was just about to ask what was wrong, he suddenly heard shocked voices from the crowd below. He immediately turned to look in Elder Liao's direction and saw that the scattered mist of the shattered lotus had attempted to dive into Elder Liao's body once more, as if it had a life of its own. Humph, don't you dare. With a cold harumph, Zhongxian flicked out several dozen silver needles and flung them in Elder Liao's direction. Woo woo woo. The silver needles fell right on the various acupoints all over Elder Liao's body, impeding the mist from delving back into his body. As if meeting its nemesis, the mist released a sizzling sound upon contact with the silver needles before dissipating. Heaving a sigh of relief, Zhongxian waved his hand and pulled Elder Liao back from the sky, gently placing his back onto the stretcher. Then, he tapped his finger lightly on the latter's glabella. Cough cough. While violently coughing, Elder Liao opened his eyes once more and spurted out black blood. After which, he sat up from the stretcher. Peeper. A resounding cracking sound reminiscent of snapping bamboo shoots sounded from within his body. This is. Divine Healer Bai Yu widened his eyes in shock. His making a breakthrough in his cultivation, he was well aware of the circumstances surrounding his old friend. Under the assault of the fire poison, his friend's vitality had been waning constantly, putting him on the verge of death. Even with his superior medicinal skill as the divine healer, he was still unable to treat him. Who would have thought that with just a few needles and a simple tap on the forehead, the young man would actually be able to induce a breakthrough in his old friend? Could he be seeing things? Hong long long. Before he could recover from his shock, more and more cracking sounds echoed from Elder Liao's body. Following which, his cultivation swiftly surged, rising from Saint Seven Dan intermediate stage to pinnacle within moments. Even so, the momentum in his surge of strength showed no sign of calming down. Elder Liao shattered his phantasmal space realm pinnacle bottleneck within 10 breaths, and a dominion tinged with the power of dimension sundering suddenly extended from his body. It was only then that the rise in his cultivation gradually slowed to a halt. Half-dimension sundering realm. To rise from phantasmal space realm intermediate stage to half-dimension sundering realm in a single shot, this rate of cultivation could be said to be unprecedented. Divine Healer Bai Yu's lips twitched uncontrollably. The cultivation of his old friend had never risen ever since he was afflicted with the fire poison. For several centuries now, he had remained stagnant at phantasmal space realm intermediate stage. Who would have thought that he would suddenly experience such a tremendous surge in his cultivation, shattering all of the bottlenecks that lay in his path? Elder Liao was also shocked beyond words. Feeling the overflowing power harnessed within his body, he sat in a daze on the stretcher, wondering if he was in a dream. Before he was knocked out, his vitality had been swiftly dissipating, putting him on the verge of death. But when he opened his eyes, not only did he fully recover from his illness, his cultivation had also risen by leaps and bounds. At this point, he was deeply frightened that he would simply wake up and find that it was all a lie. He slapped his face, and to his relief, stinging pain assaulted his cheeks. I am still alive. The sudden realization of this fact made Elder Liao tremble in agitation, and even to his own surprise, tears began streaming down his cheeks. For how many years, he had teetered on the edge of death. He had thought that his time had finally come, and death had descended upon him to claim his dues. Yet, at the very last moment, a savior appeared, and not only was his affliction cured, he even achieved a breakthrough in his cultivation. He pushed himself up from the stretcher and walked up to Zhongxian. Standing before the young man who had brought him out of his anguish, His knees fell to the ground. Zhongshe, thank you for saving my life. Even though he had been unconscious and was oblivious to what had happened, he could tell that Zhongxian had paid a heavy price for him just by looking at the latter's pale face and trembling body. There's no need to stand on ceremony. To be honest, I didn't have much confidence either, considering the critical state you were in. It's a huge relief that everything turned out fine, Zhongxian replied with a forced smile. Puha. He suddenly collapsed to the ground. This time, his injuries were not faked. He had just depleted himself from executing the sea-severing sword when he had to deal with Elder Liao's fire poison. Even if he had a pinnacle spirit stone in hand to replenish his spiritual energy, the immense mental toll he had been put under still left him on the edge of fainting at any moment. Zhongshe. Elder Liao hurriedly stood up to support Zhongxian. Who? Divine Healer Bai Yu also quickly descended from the sky to examine Zhongxian. Don't worry, he's just suffering from overexertion. With sufficient spiritual energy and time, he should be able to fully recover from his condition without any lingering trauma. The reason he wanted to make a move on Zhongxian earlier was because he thought that the young man bore malicious intentions toward Elder Liao. But with all that had happened, it was apparent that he had misunderstood the young man's intentions, so all hostility he bore toward the young man had disappeared without a trace. More importantly, he had been looking into his old friend's condition for several centuries now, only to remain deeply helpless before it. Yet, in less than 3 minutes, not only did the young man manage to resolve his old friend's affliction, he even induced a breakthrough in the latter. On top of that, there was no medicine or any complex procedure to the treatment process at all. This left him feeling deeply perplexed. That's good. That's good. Hearing that Zhongxian was fine, Elder Liao heaved a sigh of relief. Zhongshe, what is going on? Divine Healer Bai Yu asked. He had been a physician for many centuries now, but he had never seen any treatment method like this. And what was even more confounding was that it was actually extremely effective, vanquishing the affliction in just a few moments. Pardon me for my earlier insult. I had to provoke you in order to treat Elder Liao, so I hope that you won't take it to heart. Struggling up for a moment, Zhongxian clasped his fist apologetically. Don't worry about that, I won't take it to heart. Divine Healer Bai Yu waved his hand. Putting aside being berated, even if he had been beaten up, he felt that it would have been well worth the price for his old friend to be treated. Not to mention, he had been able to witness such miraculous medical skills on top of that. This had deeply incited his curiosity as a physician. Divine Healer Bai Yu clasped his fist and requested with an earnest look in his eyes, Zhongshe, I ask of you to answer my doubts. Hearing those words, Fei Shu, Feng Zi, Zhong Yu, and the others also quickly turned curious gazes over in their direction. If Elder Liao had ingested a pill and driven his zhenqi in certain circulation pathways in order to resolve the fire poison, it would have been understandable that he achieved a breakthrough. But what had happened earlier, knocking out the patient, criticizing the principal physician, and pummeling the patient to the ground, how the heck did it turn out to be another treatment method? It was completely inconceivable to the crowd. If it was that easy to treat an affliction, there would not be so many patients who died of illnesses every single day in the world. Seeing Divine Healer Bai Yu's intent gaze, Zhongxian said with a bitter smile, My apologies, but will you allow me to heal up a little before answering your doubts? He was feeling so feeble that he could faint at any moment now, let alone explain the situation to the other party. Of course. Please pardon my lack of consideration, Divine Healer Bai Yu quickly replied in embarrassment. He had been too focused on learning that he had forgotten the young man's current state. I have an energy repository pill here that can help you recover from your depletion. Divine Healer Bai Yu flicked his wrist and passed a jade bottle over. As the top physician of the Sanctum of Sages, there were countless patients who sought his treatment each year. As a result, he had plenty of good items on him. Zhongxian took out the energy repository pill from the jade bottle, and after taking a look at it, he shook his head helplessly. The pill was of good quality, but to him, it was not of much use anymore. Due to his Heaven's Path zhenqi, there was a strict requirement on the concentration of the spiritual energy he could absorb. The higher his cultivation became, the higher the requirement was. While the energy repository pill would be effective to even the average dimension sundering realm expert, it was no different from popping a sweet to him. Thank you, but I'm afraid that this pill is completely ineffective to me. Zhongxian shook his head as he passed the pill back into Bai Yu's hands. It's ineffective. Bai Yu was taken aback. I still have a couple of them here if you need more. Physician Bai, I appreciate your goodwill, but I think I'll find a way myself. At which point, Zhongxian hesitated for a brief moment, but he still could not bring himself to use his pinnacle spirit stone. So, he turned to the elder by the other side and said, Elder Liao, may I trouble you a little? Zhongshe, there's no need to stand on ceremony. Feel free to say whatever you require. As long as it's within my means, consider it done. Elder Liao nodded. That's a relief. Zhongxian nodded as a hint of excitement flashed across his eyes. Then, Elder Liao, I'd need to trouble you to achieve a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm. Achieve a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm? Elder Liao was stunned. Chapter 1389 Frenzied Hu Qing. Should the first instinct of a drained cultivator not be to look for spirit stones and pills to recover his vitality? Why was the young man asking Elder Liao to push for a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm? It did not make sense at all. Furthermore, pushing for a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm meant that Elder Liao would have to face a lightning tribulation. After years of turmoil from the fire poison, his body had already been emptied out. If he attempted to push for a breakthrough right now, it was likely that he would be zapped to death. Surely you aren't intending to send him to death's embrace shortly after pulling him back from the gates of hell? Elder Liao was completely dumbstruck as well. I'll need you push for a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm in order for me to recover. The reason you were able to make a breakthrough so quickly is due to the energy you have accumulated over several centuries. If I'm not mistaken, you should have enough drive in you to push for a breakthrough to the dimension sundering realm, right? Zhongxian asked feebly. The reason Elder Liao was able to achieve so many breakthroughs at once was not because of his exceptional talent or Zhongxian's miraculous treatment but because of the hard work he had put into cultivating over the past several centuries. Previously, his cultivation had stagnated mainly due to the fire poison, but once that had been resolved, the energy he had accumulated over this long period of time immediately burst forth, allowing his cultivation to soar. Considering how much he had accumulated over the years, Elder Liao should not have just stopped at half-dimension sundering realm. It would be sufficient for him to push to higher realms, just that he chose to suppress it forcefully out of fear for the dimension sundering ordeal. But Elder Liao was conflicted. Don't worry, you will succeed, Zhongxian told him with a resolute gaze. All right then. Seeing the deep desire in Zhongxian's eyes, Elder Liao gritted his teeth and removed the limitation he had placed on his cultivation. Boom. As soon as the energy was released, the surrounding air began growing viscous. Following which, through their spiritual perception, the crowd realized that storm clouds were beginning to congregate above them. Don't challenge your dimension sundering ordeal here, or else the formations could cause the lightning tribulation to run amok. Let's head out instead. Halfway through his words, Zhongxian suddenly widened his eyes in realization and halted. On top of the defensive formations cast over the individual dueling rings, there were also aura-isolating formations that served to prevent anything within from getting out. As such, it was likely that the lightning tribulation would not be able to find its target and strike the area in frenzy instead, similar to what had happened when he challenged his leaving aperture ordeal. But while this might end in a tragedy to others, this was exactly what he was wishing for. The storm clouds would grow bigger as a result of being unable to find its target, thus providing a greater source of energy to him. Just thinking of how it would be bigger than Luo Xuanqing's, Zhongxian could not help but tremble in agitation as he looked at Elder Liao with eyes filled with desire. You're right, I'll go out. Elder Liao nodded, but just as he wanted to leave the main hall, the young man suddenly shook once more, and his body seemed to have become even feebler. It's fine. You don't have to head out anymore. Doing it here is fine. Elder Liao blinked blankly. It's just a moment ago that you told me to head out so that I don't destroy the Hall of Propriety accidentally, but all of a sudden, you are asking me to stay? Zhongxian turned around and instructed, Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast, You head out to attack the lightning tribulation first. You want me to attack the lightning tribulation? The netherworld azure dragon beast cowered backward, and it nearly plummeted from the sky. It had been through the dimension sundering ordeal before, and it had nearly died from that darned lightning tribulation. Its fear toward the lightning tribulation was so great that it would be paralyzed in the face of it, and yet, to attack it straight on. It was still young, and it did not want to die yet. Master, can I not go? The netherworld azure dragon beast looked at Zhongxian with large, pleading eyes, which might have possibly looked like puppy eyes had its eyes not been as big as lanterns. If you feel that I haven't done a good job beating up that Baiyu guy earlier, I can continue hitting him till you are happy. Just, don't make me face that lightning tribulation. Divine healer Baiyu's mouth quivered upon hearing those words. Stop with your nonsense and hurry up and do it. Zhongxian frowned in displeasure. All right. Grumbling beneath its breath, the netherworld azure dragon beast headed out with a despaired look on its face. Hong long long. A moment later, the ominous clouds grew even bigger. What had only covered the Hall of Propriety earlier expanded to encompass an area of over several hundred mu. Zhongxian nodded in satisfaction before turning to Baiyu. Physician Bai, I'll need you to attack the lightning tribulation too. Me too. Divine healer Baiyu's lips twitched upon hearing those words. I'll be troubling you. Don't worry, there won't be any problem. Knowing what the other party was worried about, Zhongxian replied earnestly. I know what I'm doing. You know what you're doing? Baiyu's body trembled upon hearing those words. Is this what you mean by you know what you are doing? Your head. Isn't this obviously an attempt to murder Elder Liao? Noting the other party's hesitation, Zhongxian said, Since I have a way to drag him back from the gates of hell, I hope that you can believe me when I say that I have a way to him help tide through the lightning tribulation too. All right then. After a long moment of hesitation, Divine Healer Baiyu looked at Zhongxian's confident look and recalled the miracle that the young man had pulled off earlier. Thus, he gritted his teeth and dashed out. Seeing how Zhongxian had instructed the netherworld azure dragon beast and Divine Healer Baiyu to intercept Elder Liao's lightning tribulation, Fei Shu, Feng Zi, and the others were completely flabbergasted. They had never seen anyone committing suicide in such a manner. Just what in the world was the young man up to? In a certain room of the Hall of Propriety, several elders were seated in an oval. The green-robed old man sitting at the end of the oval was the person in charge of the Hall of Propriety, Elder Hu Qing. For those matters, they can be resolved in such a manner. Elder Hu Qing was in the midst of instructing the other elders when his eyebrows suddenly shot up, and he sprung to his feet. What happened? Someone is undergoing their lightning tribulation? Who in the world is so inconsiderate as to face their dimension-sundering ordeal here? This is really bad. The entire Hall of Propriety could very well be destroyed. Sensing the congregating storm clouds and ferocious crackling of lightning in the sky, the other elders also swiftly noticed that something was amiss. If such powerful bolts of lightning really fell upon the Hall of Propriety, the entire place could very well be reduced to rubble. Assemble all of the elders. We'll protect the Hall of Propriety, Hu Qing roared decisively before leaping up into the sky. Who? In the blink of an eye, another dozen managerial elders leaped up as well, and floating in the midst of the sky, they looked at the accumulation of lightning with awful looks on their faces. They had looked over the Hall of Propriety faithfully for many years, so how could they allow anything to undo their hard work? After seeing that all of the elders had gathered around, Hu Qing bellowed an instruction with gritted teeth. Elder Zhao, I need you to check who is undergoing the lightning tribulation here. Of all places that person could undergo their lightning tribulation, why did they have to choose there? In fact, there was a facility in the Hall of Integrity built solely for the purpose of assisting cultivators in facing their lightning tribulation through alleviating the effects of the inner demons. Yet, to choose to do it here instead, was he intending to bring the entire Hall of Propriety down with him? Yes. Elder Zhao quickly nodded. But just as he was about to head into the main hall, he suddenly saw a netherworld azure dragon beast rushing out with a sonic boom, and with a golden hue infused into its claws, it dashed straight toward the storm clouds. Catcher! Having come under the assault of another party outside of the cultivator supposed to face the ordeal, the area of the storm clouds immediately expanded. What is that fellow trying to do? Is it attempting suicide? All of the elders were frenzied by what they saw. It isn't even your lightning tribulation, so why are you trying to attack it so desperately? Do you have a grudge with the person undergoing the ordeal? Hurry up and stop that fellow. Hu Qing immediately barked out an order. However, before any of the elders could move, the highly esteemed divine healer Bai Yu suddenly flew out of the main hall as well. With a flick of his wrist, he channeled imposing might in his palm, and with a forceful thrust, he struck it out toward the storm clouds in the sky. Catcher! 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 The storm clouds immediately expanded to over 1,000 mu wide, covering the vast expanse of the entire Hall of Propriety. Bai Yu, what are you doing? Hu Qing nearly went insane on the spot. 1 mu is equivalent to 666. 6 square meters. Chapter 1390 Bon Appetit. Divine Healer Bai Yu had a rather close relationship with the other elders in the Hall of Propriety, and they often went out for expeditions in seek of treasures and medicinal herbs together. Yet, in this crucial moment, despite seeing that someone was undergoing a lightning tribulation, not only was he refusing to help, he was even attacking it. This was no different from seeing a burning house and quickly grabbing a bottle of gasoline to pour on it. Are you trying to seal off all chances of the individual undergoing the dimension-sundering ordeal from surviving the lightning tribulation, or are you uncertain whether the lightning tribulation was large enough to devastate the entire Hall of Propriety, so you chose to head out here to ensure it? Hong Long. Paying no heed to Hu Qing, Bai Yu channeled might into his palm once more and sent another strike toward the storm clouds. Catcher. Provoked by those who dared challenge its rules, the lightning tribulation sent down 2 thick streaks of lightning down upon the netherworld azure dragon beast and Bai Yu. In just an instant, the bodies of the duo stiffened as their hair and dragon scales stood on end before plummeting from the sky. The authority of the heavens isn't to be challenged, Hu Qing remarked with a shake of his head. After which, he raised his hand and roared, "Activate the grand defensive formation of our Hall of Propriety to fend off the lightning tribulation. At the same time, dig out that fellow who is undergoing his dimension-sundering ordeal and have him sent off to the Hall of Integrity immediately." Yes. 2 elders quickly nodded, but just as they were about to dash into the main hall to grab the cultivator undergoing the dimension-sundering ordeal, the charred Bai Yu and netherworld azure dragon beast suddenly flew up once more and sent a furious surge of power toward the storm clouds. Catcher! Catcher! The lightning grew even larger. Lightning sparks crackled imposingly amid the storm clouds, as if heralding an impending catastrophe. Divine Healer Bai Yu and the netherworld azure dragon beast were both Saint 8 Dan pinnacle experts, so their provocation easily caused a massive intensification of the lightning tribulation. At this point, what was above them could no longer be considered a dimension-sundering ordeal anymore. Even a Saint 9 Dan expert would have a layer of skin torn off facing something of that caliber. How am I supposed to survive such a lightning tribulation? Elder Liao collapsed weakly to the ground, paralyzed on the spot. Just who in the world did he offend to warrant such a treatment? It was just a moment ago that he was dragged back from the gates of hell, rekindling hope more in him. However, in the blink of an eye, he was shoved down into the abyss of despair once more. Even though he had built up an extremely powerful foundation over the years, he knew very well that he would never survive even the first bolt of lightning from the billowing storm clouds above here. Calm down, everything will be fine. Just let those 2 make it a bit larger, and we'll be done. Noticing Elder Liao's panic, Zhongxian patted his shoulder and reassured him. Elder Liao felt even more stifled on the inside. All right, I think it should be about time. Let's head out now. Seeing that the lightning tribulation had already congregated to its limit under the combined assault from the netherworld azure dragon beast and Bai Yu, seemingly about to lose control at any moment, Zhongxian shook his head slightly in pity before beckoning Elder Liao to follow. Theoretically speaking, it was possible for a lightning tribulation to grow stronger endlessly as long as it were to come under continual assault, but limited by its foundations, it would start crumbling apart once it grew beyond a certain size. It was just like an engineer trying to modify a simple bucket and a spade into a massive excavator. It was simply an impossible act because of how poor the foundations they were working on were. "We'll die if we head out at this point," Elder Liao exclaimed with a pale face, his legs trembling uncontrollably. Even though he had been through many life and death situations, he still could not help but feel natural apprehension and fear toward the might of the heavens. "Die? Don't worry, that won't happen under my watch." Knowing what Elder Liao was frightened of, Zhongxian assured him with a radiant smile. "I'll help you deal with your lightning tribulation later on. What you have to do is release your strength whenever you see that the lightning tribulation is getting smaller or on the verge of escaping." Got that? Lightning tribulation getting smaller? On the verge of escaping? Elder Liao was dumbstruck by those terms. He could understand those words individually, but it became incomprehensible to him when strung together in a sentence. "Zhongshe, can you phrase it clearer? I don't understand what you are saying. I really don't." The lightning tribulation was a natural force sworn to never rest until the individual facing it finally succumbed, but why did it somehow become an adorable entity when filtered through your mouth? What getting smaller and escaping? Do you take the lightning tribulation to be a pet in your house? It's fine that you don't get what I'm saying at this point. Just keep my instructions in mind and act accordingly later on. Knowing that it would be hard for him to explain this matter in a way that sounded convincing to Elder Liao, Zhongxian did not bother to elaborate further on the matter. Instead, he flicked his wrist and took out various items to prepare as he began making his way out of the main hall. Seeing how confident Zhongxian was, Elder Liao was a little lost for a moment. He briefly hesitated before he finally bucked up his courage and followed Zhongxian with a severe look on his face, reminiscent of a soldier marching to his death. Zhongyu gulped nervously before asking, "Fei Shi, shall we head out to take a look too?" Fei Shi nodded. Even though they were indoors, they could still somewhat sense the sheer size of the storm clouds through their spiritual perception. From how densely the lightning tribulation was gathered around them, they roughly estimated that it spanned over an area of 1,000 mu. If it were to descend on them, it was likely that none of them would be able to escape. But since Zhongxian was so confident about the matter, it would be worth heading out to see how he intended to deal with this crisis they were in. Fengzi quickly headed out as well, but barely after taking a few steps, he saw Zhongyu stumbling over his own feet, nearly falling to the ground. He immediately frowned. What's wrong? As a genius of the Zhong clan, Zhongyu should have been through plenty of huge affairs before. Surely, he need not be so frightened as to stumble over his own feet when they were not even completely out of the main hall yet, right? Completely oblivious to Fengzi's question, Zhongyu stared at the sky with widened eyes as he muttered in a daze beneath his breath, "What the heck is Zhongshe doing?" Frowning, Fengzi turned his gaze to the sky as well, and the sight that he saw left him frozen silly on the spot. In this very instant, Zhongxian had whipped out a white cloth from somewhere and folded it neatly before his chest. He elegantly took out a cup of water and gargled his mouth, as if he was about to enjoy a sumptuous course in a top restaurant. Is he going to eat? Fengzi scratched his head frenziedly at that sight. He had been with his teacher for many years, but he had never heard of anyone getting so excited before the deeply feared lightning tribulation before. Was that fellow here to challenge the lightning tribulation or dine on delicacies? Catcher. In his moment of shock, he saw Zhongxian and Elder Liao walking out of the main hall. As soon as the star of the show appeared, the storm clouds in the sky immediately began rumbling intensely, seemingly ready to fall at any moment. "Zhongshe, regardless of whether I am able to tide across this lightning tribulation or not, I would still like to thank you for saving my life." Elder Liao was still a little afraid prior to this, but upon seeing the vast expanse of storm clouds that plunged the entire world into darkness, he realized that there was no way he would be able to escape anymore. It was either do or die. Perhaps it was the realization that he was completely helpless in this situation that made him accept the position he was in instead. As someone who had bravely charged into the midst of the boreal fire poison in order to fend off the otherworldly demonic tribe, Elder Liao was definitely no wimp, or else he would not have been promoted to become a managerial elder in the Sanctum of Sages in the first place. There's no need to waste your breath on such emotional words. Nothing will happen to you. Just stay right here and wait for me. I'll be right back. Zhongxian interjected with a wave of his hand before decisively leaping into the midst of the sea of lightning above. He's dashing right into the storm clouds. But he'll die like that. Everyone was stunned. Even Hu Qing nearly fell from the sky upon seeing this sight. They had seen cultivators who turned around as fast as they could upon meeting lightning, and they had also seen those who would bury themselves as deep underground as they could to hide from the lightning, but this was the first time they had seen someone dashing right into the lightning tribulation. Zhongshe. Not expecting Zhongxian to make such a move, Elder Liao's eyes reddened in agitation. The other party was dashing into the lightning tribulation all for him. Just as he was about to dash in as well to assist the young man in fending off the lightning tribulation, the storm clouds suddenly billowed, and oddly enough, just as the young man had told him earlier, the storm clouds seemed to have contracted considerably. Perplexed, Elder Liao was just wondering whether he should release his energy as the young man had instructed him to do earlier, but then the lightning tribulation suddenly turned around and fled as if it had met its own nemesis. Its speed was so fast that not even the fastest cultivator could possibly catch up with it. With the escape of the storm clouds, the sky swiftly cleared up, revealing Zhongxian's profile in the sky. In this moment, the young man was looking at the escaped storm cloud with a helpless look on his face. Just as he was about to speak up, his chest suddenly puffed up. Europe. A resounding burp similar to the beating of a drum echoed crisp and clear. Chapter 1391 The way to resolve the poison. Did he really dive into the storm clouds to eat? But what's edible inside the storm clouds? Feng Zi, Zhong Yu, and the others looked at one another with utterly horrified expressions. That was a lightning tribulation, something that even the most powerful of cultivator would have a headache facing. Yet, that fellow actually rushed right in to have a meal, even releasing a resounding burp right afterward. Do you need to be so arrogant? More importantly, you even scared the lightning tribulation away. It fled away so quickly that it almost felt as if a vicious dog was chasing after it. Unable to hold it back anymore, Fei Shi asked in agitation, Elder Liao, that's your dimension sundering ordeal, right? What's going on? How am I supposed to know what's going on? Elder Liao was on the verge of insanity as well. True, that was indeed his lightning tribulation, but from the start to the end, it was as if it had nothing to do with him at all. While others had to struggle desperately to survive their lightning ordeal, he simply took a look at his lightning ordeal, and a few moments later, it fled. To be honest, he was completely dumbfounded by the matter as well, and he did not know what to make of the situation. Try your cultivation. If you are able to tap into the power of dimension sundering, that means that you have successfully cleared the lightning tribulation, Feng Zi suddenly suggested. Yuan Elder Liao nodded as he took a look into his current condition with his spiritual perception. A moment later, his eyes widened, and his mouth opened. I made a breakthrough. Without even lifting a finger, he had already gone through his lightning tribulation. This had to have been the easiest breakthrough anyone had made in the entire history of the Master-Teacher continent. As expected. Hearing Elder Liao's acknowledgement, Feng Zi's mouth twitched. He lifted his head once more to take a look and saw the young man who had dived into the storm clouds a moment earlier slowly descending with a look of pity and bitter regret on his face. Seeing the young man's state, Elder Liao hurried forward and asked worriedly, What's wrong? It's nothing much. Zhongxian waved his hand. He had thought that with how much the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast and Divine Healer Baiyu had expanded the storm clouds, he would be able to make a full recovery. Yet, who could have known that the lightning tribulation had grown cunning after being absorbed twice, fleeing exceptionally decisively this time around. As soon as he dived into the storm cloud, he immediately began absorbing the lightning energy around him frenziedly, but barely after he recovered the zhenqi in the looped space of his dantian by 70%, the lightning tribulation had already noticed that something was amiss, and it unhesitatingly turned around and escaped. From the looks of it, I really should frequent the Hall of Integrity. Since that's the place where students and elders of the Sanctum of Sages visit in order to aid them in achieving breakthroughs, there should be plenty of lightning tribulations there. Zhongxian stroked his chin as he made up his mind. Attainment, solidarity, propriety, erudition, and integrity. Each of the 5 halls served their own purpose. Of them, The Hall of Integrity served to reinforce one's mental resilience, thus reducing one's vulnerability to inner demons when pushing for a breakthrough. For this reason, countless students would visit it each day. If there was really no way around it, he could consider camping at the Hall of Integrity to absorb the lightning tribulations that arrived there. He should be able to make substantial progress in his cultivation that way. Liao Xin, you managed to achieve a breakthrough? While Zhongxian was in the midst of contemplating over his future plans, divine healer Baiyu descended from the sky, and upon seeing the Dominion Sundering Realm Dominion extending from his old friend, a deep hint of astonishment surfaced on his face. He had thought that this breakthrough would surely be fraught with danger, but who would have thought that it would pass by so calmly, as if all of the build-up before was nothing but empty threats. In the midst of his shock, he directed a look of admiration toward the young man before him as well. Just, what's going on? Divine healer Baiyu could not help but ask once more. The matter concerning the lightning tribulation is a secret art imparted to me by my teacher, so I'm afraid that it'll be inconvenient for me to speak too much of it before others, Zhongxian said with a wave of his hand. In any case, he already had a junior, Feng Zi, to validate his identity, so he could still push everything that was inconceivable about him to his teacher. In any case, the current Yang Shi was uncontactable anyway, so no one would be any the wiser. Then, what about the fire poison that Liao Xin was suffering from before? Seeing that the young man was unwilling to speak about the lightning tribulation, divine healer Baiyu turned the topic to the fire poison, which he had been deeply intrigued about all this while. It's true that the boreal fire poison that Elder Liao was afflicted with could be suppressed using the Hyamal Yin formula, but as time went by, it started to develop its own consciousness, Zhongxian explained. Consciousness? You mean that a spirit developed within the boreal fire poison? Divine healer Baiyu pondered for a moment before nodding. There were indeed poisons in this world that possessed consciousness, granting them the ability to avoid danger. These were the poisons that usually left both patients and physicians helpless. Since it had developed its own consciousness, the boreal fire poison began to consciously avert the suppression of the Hyamal Yin formula. As a result, the cultivation of the technique would not only be ineffective in suppressing the poison, it would cause his physical condition to further deteriorate as well. It's for that reason that I persuaded him to stop cultivating the Hyamal Yin formula, Zhongxian continued. He had gathered this through the Library of Heaven's Path earlier, which was also the reason he had offered Elder Liao the advice to stop practicing the Hyamal Yin formula. Under normal circumstances, as long as Elder Liao stopped cultivating the technique, considering that the fire poison was under the control of a conscious spirit, it shouldn't have acted up in the short term. With ample preparation, it should have been possible to get rid of it once and for all in a single go. But you just had to bring in the Nymphea Tetragona at this moment. Recalling what he had just seen after knocking Elder Liao out a moment ago, he couldn't help but shake his head. The Nymphea Tetragona is indeed one of the nemesis of the boreal fire poison, and it would have worked had the fire poison not awoken its consciousness yet. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. When Elder Liao ingested the Nymphea Tetragona, it swiftly induced a violent response from the boreal fire poison. Under the conscious control of the boreal fire poison spirit, it managed to assimilate the power of the Nymphea Tetragona and further its prowess. In the first place, Elder Liao's vitality was already waning, and the strengthening of the fire poison further worsened his physical state. As a result, he rapidly succumbed to the onslaught of the poison, thus resulting in his frail state a while ago. Upon coming to realize what had happened, divine healer Baiyu's face reddened in embarrassment. It was just a moment ago that he had felt indignant at the other party saying that he was an incompetent physician, but after hearing everything that Zhongxian had said, what was he if not an incompetent physician? It was because of his careless prescription of the Nymphea Tetragona that his old friend had nearly lost his life. There was a slight moment of silence from divine healer Baiyu before he asked once more, "Then, how did you manage to resolve the fire poison?" Even though the other party had resolved the poison right before his eyes, he was still unable to make sense of how it had been done. It's actually rather simple. The birth of a spirit in the boreal fire poison does make it a far more fearsome adversary, but at the same time, its possession of consciousness meant that the boreal fire poison would have a goal and thus could be manipulated. The goal of the fire poison was actually rather simple, it simply wanted to absorb more energy and grow as fast as possible. In a sense, the boreal fire poison could be viewed as a parasite, and it had a somewhat symbiotic relationship with its host. Or to put it in simpler terms, it was against its interests to allow its host to die quickly, or else it would lose its source of nutrients. That's also why I intentionally provoked you and had you clash with the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast. By having the both of you execute your strongest moves and placing Elder Liao in the midst of your clash, the boreal fire poison would feel deeply threatened. In order to sustain Elder Liao's life, it would have to morph into a lotus and protect him from your attacks. While it did succeed in protecting Elder Liao, your attacks were so powerful that it suffered tremendous damage, placing it on the verge of dissipation. In this timely moment, I used my sword to strike down on its opening, causing it to be unable to hold its form anymore and dissipate. However, this didn't mean that the threat of the fire poison was over. In its severely injured state, the remnants of the boreal fire poison sought to delve back into Elder Liao's body, where it would slowly bide its time and recover, but it ended up being halted by my silver needles, thus eventually resulting in its complete dissipation. And without the fire poison suppressing his cultivation, the energy that Elder Liao had accumulated over many years swiftly burst forth, allowing him to achieve successive breakthroughs. And as for the happenings afterward, it's exactly as you have seen, so I'll just stop here, Zhongxian said with a smile. Actually, the entire matter was not that complex at all. The main issue only lay in the boreal fire poison within Elder Liao's body developing a spirit. To think that the consciousness of a poison could actually be used against it in such a manner, Divine Healer Bai Yu remarked in awe as he nodded in realization. It was a well-known fact among high-rank physicians that lethal poisons that had developed their own spirits were the most difficult to deal with, but who knew that it was possible to resolve the complicated issue with such a simple solution? Indeed, Zhongxian said with a nod. He was just about to continue on when his eyes suddenly lit up in excitement. The innate fetal poison within me is also a poison that possesses a spirit. Is it possible for me to use the same method to deal with it? Chapter 1392 Yang Shi's strength. Zhongxian took a look into his body, and eventually, he shook his head helplessly. All it took was one glance to tell that the innate fetal poison was not as compassionate as the boreal fire poison. Putting aside saving its life, it would already be a great blessing if it did not backstab him when he was in serious danger. It would be better for him not to take the risk. It was one thing if he failed to resolve the innate fetal poison, but if he were to lose his life a result of it as well, it would really be a huge tragedy. After all, he did not possess vicious ability to revive from scraps. Young master, speak of the devil. As soon as he thought of Vicious, the latter's voice immediately sounded in his ears. Yes. Zhongxian asked with a frown. As the Sanctum of Sages was filled with innumerable experts, Vicious would usually avoid communicating him unless there was something truly important. Under the onslaught of the lightning earlier, Kong Shi's will that permeates the entire Sanctum of Sages dulled slightly, and for a moment, I felt the presence of my skeletal frame. Vicious' voice was filled with agitation and excitement, and the entire Book of Heaven's Path seemed to be trembling in resonance to his emotions. Skeletal frame? Which part? Zhongxian asked. Vicious was simply too fragmented. If it was just a small bone or finger, it would make not much of a difference to his current fighting prowess. It's the skeletal frame of my entire upper body. I'm certain of it, it is definitely in the Sanctum of Sages, Vicious exclaimed excitedly. The skeletal frame of your entire upper body? Zhongxian's eyes widened in astonishment. Just by fusing with a few bones, he already wielded strength on par with Saint Seven Dan experts. If he were to fuse together with his entire upper body, would he not be able to defeat even Saint Nine Dan experts easily? If Vicious were to really wield such power, he would have more cards to deal with the Zhong clan if the situation fell through. That's right, Vicious replied. It seemed like even he did not expect that a part of him would actually be sealed within the esteemed Sanctum of Sages. Can you sense the general direction of where it is? Zhongxian asked. As long as Vicious could identify the exact location of it, he would be able to make some preparations to retrieve it. Of course, That would also depend on whether the skeletal frame had its own consciousness or not. If it did, the vicious in the Book of Heaven's Path might just end up being assimilated into that vicious instead. Kong Shu's will is simply too strong, so I can't sense its exact location anymore. Unless. At which point, Vicious hesitated for a moment before continuing. If a lightning tribulation as large as the previous one occurs, it should be able to suppress the aura temporarily, granting me sufficient time to determine the exact location of my skeletal frame. Due to the presence of Kong Shu's writing all over the place and the several dozen millenniums of respect and adulation from the student populace and elders, the entire sanctum of sages was permeated with his will and spirit, hindering Vicious perception. Only during a lightning tribulation, when the will was busy vying with the inner demons contained within the ordeal, would it thin a little. Another lightning tribulation as large as the previous one? Zhongxian shook his head. The only reason the previous dimension-sundering ordeal had been so powerful was due to Elder Liao's massive accumulation and the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast and Divine Healer by you striking the ordeal simultaneously. Otherwise, there was no way the lightning from a dimension-sundering ordeal could possibly cover over 1,000 mu. I'll find a way for that. Just make sure to find your skeletal frame when the time comes, Zhongxian instructed. It happened that he required lightning tribulations to replenish his strength and raise his cultivation too. Since he could achieve both goals at once, he was more than willing to do it. All right, Vicious replied before falling silent. As the both of them had communicated telepathically, the entire conversation only lasted roughly 2 breaths before Zhongxian returned his attention to reality. In the next moment, he saw Divine Healer Bai Yu staring him in excitement, saying, "Zhongshe, since you know so much about medicine, are you interested in coming over to our physician guild to conduct a lecture?" Conduct a lecture? That's right. It happens that our guild is currently studying a rather bizarre type of poison that we are still unable to remove even after 20 years of trying. We have invited many physicians over on many occasions to discuss the issue, but we still remain completely helpless before it. Since you were able to resolve the boreal fire poison in Elder Liao's body, it's apparent that you are a person of great ability. If you could just conduct a lecture in our physician guild, I believe that you would be able to provide many fresh perspectives that might just allow us to resolve the poison. Divine Healer Bai Yu exclaimed in agitation. This. Zhongxian was slightly hesitant. I am just an ordinary 7-star physician, not even reaching 8-star yet. If I conduct a lecture, there's bound to be many who would doubt my words. The fastest way to gain respect in an occupation was to show sufficient strength and proficiency in it. While Zhongxian had managed to resolve the boreal fire poison, he had relied heavily on the Library of Heaven's Path. He had not read any 8-star physician books yet, so his knowledge was still a little lacking to lecture in the physician guild. Considering how you were able to see through Liao Xin's affliction with a single glance and resolve it so easily, I'll report this matter to the headquarters and have an 8-star physician emblem applied for you this instant. Divine Healer Bai Yu said with a smile. Their physician guild branch had studied the condition of his old friend for many years now, but they had all been completely helpless before it. Just the fact that the young man was able to resolve it so easily bore testimony to his abilities. All right then. However, I'll have to take a trip to your library in order to brush up on my knowledge first, Zhongxian said with a nod. It would be good if Divine Healer Bai Yu could apply for his emblem. He would be spared from taking the examination. That's simple. Follow me. Seeing that Zhongxian had agreed to his request, Divine Healer Bai Yu heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly walked in front and led the way forward. Before leaving, Zhongxian turned around to look at Feng Zi and said, "Junior Feng, is there anything else you wish to challenge me in? If there is, you can feel free to look for me anytime you want." Feng Zi's lips twitched uncontrollably, unable to say a word at all. When he challenged the other party to a duel of fighting prowess, he ended up being pummeled pitifully despite possessing superior cultivation. When he challenged the other party to a duel of impartation, Elder Liao suddenly rushed, crying for Zhongxian to take him in as his student. Somehow, Zhongxian suddenly felt like a towering mountain before him, one that he could not overcome or circumvent. While Zhongxian was following Divine Healer Bai Yu to the Physician Guild, back in his residence, Sun Qiong was looking at the nearby Zhong Zhouxiao with a look of bewilderment. They had not tagged along to watch Feng Zi and Zhong Xian's duel but instead found some craftsmen to repair the collapsed main hall. Young Master Zhouxiao, you said earlier that Feng Zi and our young master are from the same lineage. Sun Qiong could not help but ask, could Feng Zi be our old master's student too? He had heard the other party saying those words as soon as young master walked in, but he simply found the matter a little unbelievable. No matter how he looked at Feng Zi, the latter just looked weak and dim-witted. Why would his old master take in a person of that caliber as his student? Indeed, Feng Zi is Yang Shi's student as well. Zhong Zhouxiao nodded in admiration. If he could take Yang Shi as his teacher as well, he would surely be regarded with the highest of esteem when he returned to the Zhong clan. He would not be just an ordinary member of the side family without the slightest standing at all. Hearing Zhong Zhouxiao's confirmation, Sun Qiong hesitantly asked, do you know what our old master's master-teacher rank is? All along, the old master's strength seemed to be growing along with the young master's cultivation, which made him suspect that the old master was actually not as powerful as he initially thought. Since Zhong Zhouxiao was aware of the old master's true identity, this would be a good opportunity to ask about it. If the old master was really that powerful, he would not have to lie low and hold himself humbly anymore. At the very least, he would not have to suffer the bad attitude from others when gathering intelligence in the sanctum of sages. I wasn't too aware of Yang Shi's affairs previously, but after coming to know of Feng Zi, I heard some of my clan members speaking of him. At this point, Zhong Zhouxiao's eyes suddenly lit up. He had first heard of Yang Shi when he was in the Qingyuan Empire, but due to the latter being too high-ranking, he had no idea what the significance of the name was. It was only upon arriving in the Sanctum of Sages and hearing others speak of Feng Zi that he finally realized just how high a standing and how great a power that man possessed. He's one of the Grand Elders of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, the man who wields the greatest power in the entire Master-Teacher Pavilion aside from the Pavilion Master himself. On top of that, he's a true 9-star Master-Teacher, wielding unfathomable strength in his hands that's on par with even the old ancestor of our Zhong clan. In fact, he's renowned to be one of the strongest experts in the world. Chapter 1393 Sun Qiong's Rage 1. The man who wields the greatest power in the entire Master-Teacher Pavilion other than the Pavilion Master himself. One of the strongest experts in the world. Sun Qiong's body trembled in agitation. In the past, he had thought that it would have been great if their old master was an 8-star Master-Teacher. However, in the Sanctum of Sages, Master-Teachers of such a rank were aplenty. As such, he had been forced to lie low and remain humble at all times. But who would have thought that the old master was actually such a formidable figure? One of the Grand Elders of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, a 9-star Master-Teacher, and one of the strongest experts in the world. Just any one of those titles was sufficient to leave the entire Master-Teacher continent trembling at its core. To think that a mere realtor of second-hand houses in Tianqian Kingdom like him would actually catch the eye of such an incredible figure. In that moment, a feeling of pride sprouted in Sun Qiong's heart. Considering the unfathomable eye of discernment that 9-star Master-Teachers possess, the fact that I was able to catch the eye of the old master might mean that I possess great talent that even I am unaware of. Sun Qiong widened his eyes in realization. All along, he had thought that he was an ordinary person, far lacking compared to the many geniuses in the world. However, after learning that the old master was such a formidable expert, he came to realize that he had to be a 1-in-a-million expert as well. Otherwise, why would a 9-star Master-Teacher treat him so well and even entrust him with the heavy responsibility of taking care of his direct disciple? It's Zhong Shi's fortune to have caught the eye of such a figure. But of course, I believe that Yang Shi must be delighted to have taken in a student like Zhong Shi as well, Zhong Zhouxiao remarked. While others might think that Zhong Xian had to accrue several incarnations of luck in order to find a teacher like Yang Xian, he knew very well that as long as the young man revealed his identity as a celestial Master-Teacher, there would be no Master-Teacher in the world who would not be willing to take him in as their student. A moment later, Zhong Zhouxiao suddenly recalled the other party's previous question and frowned in doubt. You aren't aware of Yang Shi's true identity even though you are his butler? It was one thing for him to not know of Yangsha's true identity, but Sun Qiong was someone who had seen Yangsha on multiple occasions, so how could he possibly not know of the matter? Our old master is a humble and low-profile person, and he dislikes being in the public eye or talking about himself. As such, I'm not too sure about his affairs either, Sun Qiong replied. I see. I guess that's the attitude that master teachers should have, Zhong Zhouxiao said with a meaningful nod. True master teachers should never allow their reputation to weigh down upon them, and clearly, Yangsha was such a person. All right, the reparations for the residents are done. I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave first. Farewell. After chatting for a while longer, Zhong Zhouxiao bade farewell before leaving. Watching as Zhong Zhouxiao's figure disappeared into the distance, Sun Qiong thought about what they had discussed earlier, and a brilliant gleam twinkled into his eyes as he clenched his plump fists tightly together. Previously, when the young master tasked me with gathering some intelligence on the acquirement of pinnacle spirit stones, I wasn't able to get the job done properly due to the hesitation and fear from facing those experts. However, now that I know of the old master's identity, why should I have any fear? If anything, they should be the ones fearing me. Laughing heartily, Sun Qiong stood up from the chair, flung his sleeves, and began walking out of the room with widened strides. As the butler of the #1 expert in the world and a 9-star master teacher, his standing should at least be on par with the sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages. Surely it would be nothing much for him to inquire some information. Thus, he swiftly made his way over to the Hall of Integrity. On top of reinforcing one's mental fortitude and tempering one's character, the Hall of Integrity served as an information hub for important news. Most of the missions for the students of the Sanctum of Sages were allocated here. After taking a swift look around, Sun Qiong was soon standing in front of a vast hall, and with deep confidence, he strutted in. Seated in a corner of the room was a young man in his early 20s dressed in a black robe. He turned his gaze lazily toward Sun Qiong and said, "Please take out your identity token." Sun Qiong flicked his wrist and handed over the token that Zhong Xian had given him. A butler of a freshman? Upon taking a look at the token, the young man scoffed disdainfully before tossing the identity token back. "Speak, what kind of information are you looking for? Is your young master looking for missions to participate in?" From time to time, there would be young students who would purchase news concerning missions from him to complete. "My young master isn't looking for missions to participate in." Sun Qiong shook his head. "I'm here to ask where I can exchange for pinnacle spirit stones or equivalent spirit essences and pills here in the Sanctum of Sages." Pinnacle spirit stones? A frown surfaced on the forehead of the young man, and he waved his hand perfunctorily. "I don't have such news here. You should return." "You don't have such news here?" Sun Qiong frowned in doubt. "I have visited the other places in the Hall of Integrity, and all of them said that this is the only place with such news." "How can you possibly not have such news?" The reason he had headed there directly was because he had already gathered some news on the matter the previous time he was there. According to what the others said, this hall was the only place where one could exchange for pinnacle spirit stones. "I told you that there's no such news here. Send our guest off." Just as the impatient young man was about to order the servants to drag this fatty out, an old man suddenly walked into the room. "I need a pinnacle spirit stone to reinforce my cultivation. I'll have to trouble you to help me process the exchange." As he said those words, the old man took out a couple of rare ores and the hair of saint beasts and passed them over. With just a look, Sun Qiong could tell that these were all good items. The hair and claws of powerful saint beasts could be used to make weapons or armor that were far stronger than the typical ones forged by blacksmiths, thus making them exceptionally valuable. "Elder, please wait for a moment." Seemingly recognizing the identity of the elder, the young man hurriedly turned around and rushed into another room. Some time later, he returned with a jade container in hand. Prying it open lightly, overwhelming spiritual energy immediately poured into the surroundings. A spirit stone emanating a blinding radiance came into sight. "You have my thanks." After confirming that it was a pinnacle spirit stone, the old man took the jade container and placed it into his storage ring before leaving the room. At the other party's departure, a look of displeasure surfaced on Sun Qiong's face. Didn't you say that you have no news concerning pinnacle spirit stones? Why did you process the old man's exchange straight away then? That old man that you are speaking of is the Sanctum of Sages Elder Chen, an 8-star master teacher. Do you think that a mere freshman butler like you can be compared with him? Scram to the side, the young man scoffed as he waved his hand impatiently. What do you mean by that? Sun Qiong's face turned cold. I might be a freshman butler, but it's not as if I'm asking you to give the pinnacle spirit stone to me for free. As valuable as a pinnacle spirit stone may be, I am still able to afford it at the very least. Afford it? The young man sneered coldly. Are you even qualified to buy it? Pinnacle spirit stones are an extremely rare and limited resource in the master-teacher continent. Every single one of them expended means that there's one less to go around. How in the world did a freshman butler gain the notion that you are qualified to command such a valuable resource? How ludicrous. Due to the limited quantity of pinnacle spirit stones, the Sanctum of Sages had a strict restriction on who was qualified to procure them. Those whose standing was beneath the necessary requirement would not be able to exchange for one. This was also the reason it was not used as a currency even in the Sanctum of Sages. You are saying that I'm unqualified to purchase the pinnacle spirit stones from you? Sun Qiong's face darkened, and his eyes narrowed threateningly. Weren't my words clear enough? Hurry up and scram, or else I'll just have to find someone to toss you out, the young man bellowed impatiently. Toss me out? Sun Qiong flung his sleeves furiously, and the air of an inviolable existence drifted off him. Audacious. Do you know who I am? Chapter 1394 Sun Qiong's Rage 2. Like I give a damn who you are. The young man snapped. A freshman butler like you should already be glad that you are allowed to walk around the Sanctum of Sages without obstruction. How dare you attempt to pull your weight here? Were this not a place where master teachers gathered, you would have been long thrown out for daring to speak so haughtily. Get out of here right now, otherwise I'll have no choice but to pass a restriction order on you, banning you from entering the Hall of Integrity for the rest of your life. The young man bellowed in irritation. Even the weakest of the butlers of top-notch powers would be at St. 6 Dan or 7 Dan at the minimum. On top of dealing with miscellaneous affairs, they would be able to protect their master too. On the other hand, the fellow before him was not even at Saint Realm. What the heck was he talking big for? To use such a weak butler, it could only mean that the so-called young master was from a humble background too. Yet, instead of feeling honored that he was willing to waste so many words on him, that fatty actually dared to speak to him so arrogantly. He really did not know what was the best for him. You are saying that you want to pass a restriction order on me? Hearing those words, Sun Qiong was so furious that he started laughing instead. With a grand wave of his hand, he walked straight toward the main seat in the room and sat down. I'll sit down right here and wait for you to pass your restriction order. What are you waiting for? Go on. I really will look down on you if you don't pass it today. You. Not expecting the fatty to be so arrogant as to sit right down on his teacher's seat, the young man nearly erupted on the spot. Nevertheless, he still reined in his rage at the very last moment, and with narrowed eyes, he asked sharply, Do you know what you are doing right now? For a fellow who hasn't even reached Saint Realm like you to act so arrogantly, not even putting a Saint 5 Dan expert like me in your eyes, aren't you being a little too brazen? Of course I do. Sun Qiong sneered coldly with a voice filled with confidence. Rather, do you know whom you are facing, speaking to me in such a manner? With a deep frown, the young man took in a deep breath and asked lividly, Who in the world are you? Given how the other party dared to act so arrogantly before him, there could be a chance that the other party might really have strong backing. Having been in the Sanctum of Sages for so long, he never would have survived through the years if he was not discerning enough to differentiate the real from the fake. You aren't worthy of knowing who I am. Get the elder managing your Hall of Integrity or the deputy sanctum head over here. Seated calmly on the spot, Sun Qiong waved his hand imposingly with the air of a person in authority, reminiscent of a conqueror grasping innumerable lives in his hands. Had he known that the old master was so formidable, he would not have had to lie so low. This was the kind of attitude that someone of his standing should be taking, otherwise he would only be an embarrassment to the old master. You want to speak to our elder or the deputy sanctum head directly? The young man's lips twitched upon hearing those words. There were various differing tiers to the teachers and elders in the sanctum of sages. Those at the bottommost level of the staff were the managerial elders. They were usually positions taken up by Saint Seven Dan experts, such as Elder Liao, and they were in charge of resolving most miscellaneous affairs and overlooking the various examinations and trials in the sanctum of sages. Above that were the people in charge of the individual occupation branches in the sanctum of sages, such as physician by you. This group of people were usually Saint 8 Dan experts. And on top of them were the 5 elders who governed the Hall of Attainment, Hall of Solidarity, Hall of Propriety, Hall of Erudition, and Hall of Integrity, such as Elder Hu Qing from the Hall of Propriety. Even the weakest of them possessed the might of half Saint 9 Dan. As for the deputy sanctum head, he was even stronger than that, possessing a cultivation of Saint 9 Dan. These figures were top-notch experts whom he would not even dare to breathe loudly before in their face, and yet, a butler who had not even reached the saint realm was demanding that they go to him, as if commanding a subordinate. Was it just empty confidence, or did he really have something to back up his words? Indeed. My initial intention was to lie low and maintain a low profile, but since this is the attitude you wish to take with me, I demand to meet them here today. No matter what, they have to offer me an explanation as to why a mere subordinate like you dares to speak to me in such a manner, Sun Qiong uttered coldly. The more he spoke of the matter, the more furious he felt. What the heck is this? Who am I? The butler of one of the strongest experts in the world. Putting aside you, even the deputy pavilion master of the master teacher pavilion headquarters would have to talk to me amicably, not daring to offend me. Yet, a mere Saint 5 Dan and like you actually dared to snub me in such a manner. You must be out of your mind. This. In the face of the other party's imposing disposition, the young man was starting to doubt if the fatty seated before him really had an esteemed identity or not. Just as he was at a loss as to what he should do, an old man suddenly walked in, and his eyes immediately lit up. He quickly rushed forward and greeted, "Teacher." The old man was his teacher, as well as the person in charge of the entire Hall of Integrity, Elder Ji Xiong. Since this matter was already beyond his jurisdiction, it would be best for him to leave it in the hands of his teacher instead. Perhaps, his teacher might recognize his fatty and know of the latter's background. If so, they would not have to take such a passive stance anymore. Seeing that someone was sitting on his seat, Elder Ge asked with a frown, "What's going on?" "You are Ji Xiong?" Before the young man could even respond, Sun Qiong had already spoken up with a face as cold as a winter's night. "You sure have taught your student well. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and offer your apologies to me." He had long heard of the person in charge of the Hall of Integrity, and he had seen the other party from afar once before. As such, he was able to recognize the other party with a single glance. "Offer my apologies?" Elder Ge frowned. A weak cultivator who had not even reached the saint realm was taking up his seat and even demanding that a half-Saint 9 Dan expert like him apologized. Was he hearing things? Where did this imbecile pop out from? Indeed. Your student said that he would chase me out from the Hall of Integrity and even issue a restriction order against me. I never thought that I would hear something so insolent from the mouth of a junior. Apologizing is already the laxest punishment I can think of. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I'll have to find someone to replace you as the head of the Hall of Integrity. Sun Qiong narrowed his eyes menacingly as he harumphed coldly. There are plenty of candidates in line to take over your position. Don't think that you're safe just because of the position you are in. Replace me. Completely speechless by what he was hearing, Elder Ge turned to the young man beside him and asked, "Who in the world is this imbecile? Just who did that fatty think he was?" Not even the deputy sanctum head had the right to remove him on a whim. To speak such arrogant words before him, was he tired of living? "Teacher, you don't know him either?" the young man asked in surprise. He had thought that his teacher would surely know this person given how knowledgeable he was, but who would have thought that his teacher would be at a complete loss as to what was happening as well? "I took a look at his identity token earlier, and he's the butler of a freshman who has just enrolled this year," the young man informed his teacher through Zhenqi telepathy. "He's the butler of a freshman? Dark streaks immediately filled Elder Ge's forehead. Were the butlers of the freshmen now also arrogant? Demanding for him to apologize and even threatening to find someone to replace him. If there's a problem with how I teach my student, the Sanctum of Sages will step in and correct me accordingly, so there's no need for you to worry about it. Rather, I would just like to ask, what right do you have to make a half-Saint 9 Dan expert like me apologize to you? Elder Ge asked with a hint of displeasure in his voice. As a high-ranked master teacher, even though he was deeply infuriated by Sun Chong's insolence, he was still able to suppress his emotions and maintain his composure. Otherwise, he surely would have sent a slap right over to the other party. How could he possibly allow such a weak fellow to spout this bunch of nonsense before him? What rights do I have? Sun Chong stood up and placed his hands before his back. He slowly took a step at a time toward Elder Ge with a lofty air surrounding him. Since you have asked such a question, fine, I'll fulfill your curiosity. My young master is a student from the latest batch of freshmen, Zhongxian. Zhongxian? Elder Ge frowned. Even though Zhongxian had caused a huge commotion in the other halls, his reputation had not reached the Hall of Integrity yet. That's right. Well, you might not have heard much about my young master, but I believe that the name of my old master should strike a chord in your mind. Harumphing coldly, Sun Chong tilted his chin upward with a proud look on his face. The Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters Yang Xian. Chapter 1395 You imposter, Yang Xian? You are Yang Shi's butler? Elder Ge was stunned for an instant before his face abruptly warped in shock. As the number 1 Grand Elder in the Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters, it went without saying that he had heard rumors about the other party. But who would have thought that this fatty standing before him would actually be that legendary man's butler? It was no wonder the other party was so arrogant and haughty. If he was truly the butler of the man who stood at the very peak of the master-teacher continent, then he definitely had the right to speak in such a manner to him. Indeed, a hint of majesty could be seen on Sun Chong's plump face as he took another step forward. After the initial shock, Elder Ge grimly questioned, Yang Shi's whereabouts have been a mystery to even the Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters. You claim that you are his butler, but do you have any evidence to prove that? Even if he was willing to believe the fatty's words, it simply did not make sense for Yang Xian to take in such a weak butler. A powerful general had no feeble soldiers under his command. For a person who was not even at Saint Realm to claim that he was Yang Xian's butler, this was simply too much of a stretch to be true. Ancient sage Qiu Wu was Kong Shi's servant as well, but he still managed to reach an unparalleled level of strength in the world. To take in such a person as his butler, it would be like a smudge on Yang Shi's name. After all, if Yang Shi really wanted a butler, not even 9-star master teachers would turn him down. Why would he choose a weakling who had not even reached Saint Realm yet? Not to mention, just by what he had seen so far, the other party was a dim-witted and crude individual. However, he could sense that the other party meant the words that he said. All of his vitals showed that he was not lying, and this was exactly what left Elder Ge feeling rather perplexed. Audacious. With a livid face, Sun Chong bellowed furiously. Are you doubting my words, or are you doubting my old master's judgment? I wouldn't dare to doubt Yang Shi's judgment. Elder Ge shook his head. However, as the butler of a 9-star master teacher, he should have imprinted his blessing within you. If it's convenient for you, I hope that you would allow me a look. Once I verify your blessing, I'll have my student apologize to you immediately. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to hold you liable for impersonating the butler of a 9-star master teacher and publicly humiliating the head of the Hall of Integrity, and the severity of these 2 sentences warrants the death penalty. Considering that the Sanctum of Sages was a subsidiary power to the Master Teacher Pavilion, naturally, Elder Ge dared not doubt the judgment of a Grand Elder from the headquarters. But so far, they had only heard empty claims from the fatty before him, so naturally, he held some reservations toward the matter. For a fellow whom even he would snub to be taken in as Yang Shi's butler, this simply sounded too ridiculous to be true. Blessing. Sun Chong was slightly startled to hear that word. He had met the old master on many occasions, but he had never heard of such a thing before. Just a surge of zhunqi from someone of Yang Shi's prowess can bring unimaginable benefits and strength to an individual. If you are truly his butler, he will have left a will or something similar within you. Otherwise, you could be killed very easily by enemies given your cultivation realm, and that would make it extremely difficult for you to work for him, don't you agree? Elder Ge explained. Since the butler was working for the master teacher, it was only natural for the master teacher to offer some degree of protection to the butler. Under normal circumstances, the subordinates of high-ranking master teachers would have some kind of blessing infused into them so as to ensure that their lives would not be threatened when facing an enemy. If the fatty before him was truly Yang Shi's butler, he was bound to have a blessing or something similar within him. Otherwise, it would reflect poorly on Yang Shi if his butler was killed. Of course my old master has bestowed upon me his blessing. Sun Qiong was trembling fearfully on the inside, but on the surface, he continued putting up a brave front and harumphed furiously. Just that, how can I possibly show his blessing to anyone else so easily? What if I scare you out of your wits? As far as he knew, the old master had not imprinted a blessing on him before, but it was already too late for him to back down at this point. Thus, he could only thicken his skin and push his way forward. In any case, as long as he refused to take out the blessing, the other party should not be able to do anything about it. Don't worry, it'll be all good as long as you have Yang Shi's blessing. There's no need for you to take it out, Elder Ge replied with a smile. A master teacher of Yang Shi's caliber is able to instill instinctive deference from other ordinary master teachers. As long as you follow me to the teacher acknowledgement hall, we'll be able to discern if your words are true via the reflection of a unique formation. Teacher acknowledgement hall? Sun Qiong's face twitched slightly upon hearing those words. Even though he was not a master teacher, he had been to all kinds of master teacher pavilions in his time with Zhongxian. He knew the significance of the teacher acknowledgement hall to master teachers and that the will of countless predecessors resided in there. There was no trickery nor falsehood that would be able to escape their eyes. The fact that he did not have the old master's blessing would be exposed in an instant if they headed there. Don't you think it's deeply disrespectful to trouble the wills of the predecessors over something as trivial as this? My old master has always preached that a person should always rely on himself as far as possible so as to not trouble others unnecessarily. Sun Qiong replied haughtily without the slightest tinge of redness in his face. The days he had spent as a realtor back in the Tianxian kingdom had allowed him to refine his art of lying. It's not a trivial matter at all. This matter concerns the honor of a 9-star master teacher, so it's imperative that we take it with utmost seriousness. Otherwise, I will have to report this matter to the master teacher pavilion headquarters and have them send an envoy to verify the matter. That truly would be troubling others, Elder Ge replied earnestly. The other party's firm confidence had left him a little doubtful earlier, but with the other party insistently refusing to verify his identity, he was starting to be more and more convinced that the other party was a fake. Without bothering to give Sun Qiong any opportunity to argue, Elder Ge turned around and instructed, "Escort Yang Shi's butler to the teacher acknowledgement hall." "Yes," the young man replied. He stepped forward, and a burst of energy surged from his palm and wrapped around Sun Qiong like iron chains, rendering the latter completely immobile. As one who had not even reached the Saint realm yet, his strength was nothing compared to the Saint 5 Dan young man. "Butler Sun, this way please," the young man gestured forward with a smile. Not expecting to be treated in such a manner, Sun Qiong's face reddened in rage. "How dare you bind the butler of a grand elder of the master teacher pavilion headquarters? Will any of you be able to bear the consequences once my old master learns of the matter?" "Bind? We would not dare bind a person as esteemed as you. All we are doing is inviting you over to the teacher acknowledgement hall to verify your identity. As Yang Shi's butler, you should be well aware of how important lineages are to master teachers, so even if Yang Shi does learn of this matter, he will agree with our actions," Elder Ge said as he walked out of the room. The young man quickly followed behind while dragging Sun Qiong along with him. Not too long later, they arrived before a vast hall. Within the hall was a massive altar filled with innumerable tablets. These had been left behind by the generations of outstanding predecessors of the Sanctum of Sages. Erected at the very center of the room was Kongsha's sculpture, and he was looking at the sky with eyes filled with compassion for the entire world. By the side of the hall, there was a row of smaller sculptures. The sculpture at the very forefront of the row was an old man whose eyes were tightly shut. He was the founder of the Sanctum of Sages, ancient sage Bo Shong. To the right of him was Sage Kuei. After which was the second sanctum head, the third sanctum head, and so on. The sculptures of these sanctum heads were significantly shorter than Kongsha, and it seemed as if they were listening to his teaching, comprehending the true nature of the world. We have arrived at the Teacher Acknowledgement Hall. If you really do possess the blessing of Yang Shi, we should be able to tell easily here, Elder Ge said with a smile before waving his hand grandly. Voila! Many rays of light shot forth from the tablets and the sculptures and fell upon Sun Qiong, embracing his body. It seemed like they were trying to detect the presence of any blessing within him. Who? A moment later, the light shrouding Sun Qiong dissipated into the surroundings. You have no blessing imprinted on you at all. As expected, you have been lying all this time, the young man bellowed in agitation. Preposterous. How can you even think of impersonating Yang Shi's butler? You must really be tired of. Elder Ge glanced at Sun Qiong with eyes that looked ready to kill. Catcher. But before Elder Ge could finish his words, a resounding explosion suddenly echoed in the hall. One of the tablets had exploded. Following which, the other tablets swiftly followed suit, as if fearing that it would be considered an act of disrespect if they were to detonate themselves late. In just the blink of an eye, the room was filled with wooden shavings all around. Chapter 1396. The Deputy Sanctum Head appears. The lower jaw of both Elder Ge and the young man fell to the ground, completely flabbergasted by what they were seeing. The situation had far exceeded their imagination. If Yang Shi's blessing was imprinted within Sun Qiong's body, all of the predecessors whose strength was beneath Yang Shi's when they left behind their will would fall down as a sign of respect to him. And based off what they knew of Yang Shi's strength, there were definitely not too many predecessors in the Sanctum of Sages who would be a match for him. If Sun Qiong was truly Yang Shi's butler, they estimated that roughly half of tablets would fall, leaving behind just a few incredible experts and the Sanctum heads. But instead of falling, they ended up exploding. What the heck was going on? Elder Ge anxiously looked at the altar of tablets before him, but as if meeting with some kind of supernatural occurrence, they were exploding one after another with increasing frequency. In just a few breaths, they had all already been reduced to wooden shavings with none surviving the ordeal. It's fortunate that the sculptures of the Sanctum heads are still intact. Elder Ge heaved a sigh of relief. It was already bad enough for the tablets to be destroyed under his watch, so if anything had happened to Sage Kuei and other sculpture as well, he really would have been in deep trouble. But before he could finish his words, cracks began creeping across the sculpture of the ninth Sanctum head, growing more and more numerous. Catcher. A second later, it was nothing more than a pile of rubble on the ground. And as if a contagious disease, the same symptoms struck the eighth Sanctum head, followed by the seventh Sanctum head, then the sixth. Even ancient sage Bo Shong was not spared from this mysterious malady and split in two, leaving behind Kongsha standing silently on the spot. At this point, Elder Ge and the young man's minds had gone completely blank. The Sanctum head of each generation was an astounding genius, be it in terms of their fighting prowess or eye of discernment. They would not pale in comparison even against the Grand Elders of the Master-Teacher Pavilion. This was even more so for ancient sage Bo Shong. As one of Kongsha's direct disciple, he had achieved a level of cultivation that not a single generation of Deputy Pavilion Masters of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters were able to match up to. So why would they shatter all of a sudden while in the midst of recognizing Yang Shi? Just when in the world did Yang Shi reach such a level of power? If that was the case, as an elder of the Sanctum of Sages, Elder Ge should have heard of the joyous news by now. Those two were not the only ones who were taken aback by the happenings. Even the perpetrator of the entire affair, Sun Qiong, was completely dumbstruck as well. He had thought that he would be exposed this time around, but who could have known that this would happen instead? While the old master had never imprinted a blessing on him, The young master did infuse several surges of junqi into his body before, saying that it would protect him in times of danger. It was out of a moment of desperation that he tried driving them earlier, but who would have thought that it would lead to the tablets exploding instead? It was as if they had met a being whom they dared not oppose. The whole debacle was too bizarre. You! Just as Sun Qiong was deep in thought, he saw Elder Ji looking at him with a speechless expression on his face. Do you believe that I am Yangshi's butler now? Seeing that he was finally out of danger, Sun Qiong heaved a sigh of relief on the inside while glancing down on Elder Ji imposingly, as if everything had been under his control all this while. Elder Ji was just about to nod when a resounding creak filled the room, and the next instant, Kongsha's sculpture placed his hands together and bowed deeply, seemingly greeting a peer. Voila! Following which, cracks began surfaced on Kongsha's sculpture as well, and it took just a few moments for it to explode into smithereens. And just as everyone thought that the worst was over, the entire teacher acknowledgement hall suddenly began shaking non-stop, and the roof began plummeting down on them one chunk at a time. Hong long long! In less than 2 breaths, the majestic building collapsed inward, becoming nothing more than a pile of rubble. Just what in the world is going on? Elder Ge and the young man looked at one another with frenzied expressions on their faces. They had been planning to bring that fellow over to verify if that fellow really had Yangshi's blessing imprinted on him or not, but who could have known that the entire teacher acknowledgement hall would end up collapsing instead? The teacher acknowledgement hall was a place where the wills of the predecessors were stored. Even if the otherworldly demonic tribe managed to destroy every single hall of the Sanctum of Sages, it would still be nigh impossible for them to tear down the teacher acknowledgement hall. Yet, the impregnable fortress was actually reduced to such a state. Are you an envoy sent by the god of destruction to bring ruination upon us? What happened? Barely after diving out of the rubble, they swiftly heard a voice in the sky. Looking up, they saw various silhouettes rushing over in their direction. The one taking the lead was an old man, and upon seeing the current state of the teacher acknowledgement hall, his lips began twitching uncontrollably, seemingly unable to believe what he was seeing. He was the incumbent deputy sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, Zhon Tiancheng. Zhonsha. Seeing that the deputy sanctum head had come down personally, Elder Ge hurriedly clasped his fist and explained everything that had happened in detail. While verifying for the presence of a blessing, the tablets all shattered, and Kongsha placed his hands together and bowed deeply. Upon hearing the story from Elder Ge, Zhon Shi and the other elders in the sky looked at one another with unbelievable expressions on their faces. For Kongsha to actually bow to another man as his peer. What a joke! Who in the world could possibly be worthy of having the world's teacher bow down to them as a peer? What I'm saying is the absolute truth. If you don't believe me, you can have him try it again once the teacher acknowledgement hall is fixed. Elder Ge exclaimed in agitation, seeing the doubt in the other's eyes. The teacher acknowledgement hall harnesses the will of many predecessors. It'll take at least half a year in order to restore it to its previous state. Zhon Shi shook his head and frowned. Why don't we do this instead? We shall temporarily seal our cultivation and use our own perceiving methods to examine Butler Sun's condition so as to determine what's going on. Their strength was already no weaker than the predecessors, so they could use the same means to determine if there was truly a blessing in Sun Qiong or not. At the same time, they would be able to find out what had happened earlier as well. Sounds good. Elder Ge nodded. Let's begin then. Zhon Shi instructed. The various elders quickly surrounded Sun Qiong, and with a flick of their wrist, a ray of light burst forth from their hands. Hong long. Just like before, the light congregated on Sun Qiong, forming a sphere of light around him. They really won't learn, will they? Seeing that the crowd was still insisting on examining him, Sun Qiong shook his head helplessly. He drove the junqi that the young master had infused into his body before turning to look at one of the elders. Pada. A slight jolt sounded, and the elder abruptly plummeted from the sky before lying in a daze on the ground, as if having encountered something terrifying. Then, Sun Qiong turned his gaze to another one of the elders. Paji. That elder plummeted from the sky, too. This. Scratching his head, Sun Qiong turned to the third elder. Wherever Sun Qiong's eyes fell, the elders in that direction would suddenly lose control of their strength and plummet to the ground. In just the blink of an eye, only Zhonshi was left in the sky. You! Watching as Sun Qiong slowly turned his head around, Zhonshi could not help but shudder in fear. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw a towering figure appearing right before his eyes. That figure was so big that he seemed to cover the entire world, or perhaps, he was the world itself, a manifestation of the authority of the heavens. Pada! A jolt struck Zhonshi's heart, and he suddenly found his Zhenqi slowing to a halt. Just like that, he plummeted from the sky as well and struck the ground head first, dyeing his hair with dirt. Watching as the deputy sanctum head and other elders fell from the sky, Elder Ji's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. His teeth clattered together in fear as he looked at the fat silhouette before him with a hint of apprehension in his eyes. The young master's Zhenqi is actually so useful. While the crowd was overwhelmed by shock and fear, Sun Qiong was reveling in his newfound ability. He excitedly drove the Zhenqi that the young master had infused into his body and swept his gaze across the crowd once more. In response to that, Zhonshi and the others convulsed on the spot. Another sweeping gaze, and they convulsed on the spot once more. Sun Qiong could not help but find the situation deeply interesting. Chapter 1397 The Real Butler 1. It was some time later before Sun Qiong reluctantly came to a halt. It was not that he did not want to continue playing with the various master teachers, but the Zhenqi that the young master had left in his body was limited in the first place. He could not just waste it all on trivial playing, he had to keep some for times of danger as well. Hoo! With Sun Qiong ceasing to abuse the heavens path Zhenqi, Zhonshi and the others finally managed to rise back up into the sky. They instinctively turned their gazes toward the fatty beneath them. Fear and shock could be seen reflected in the depths of their eyes. The detection method required them to seal their cultivation so that they could better sense the presence of a master teacher's aura with their senses. Under normal circumstances, as long as the person who had left behind the blessing was not too much stronger than them, they would only feel a surge of respect and admiration for the individual. What that had happened earlier, the loss of ability to move their bodies, should have been impossible. There had never been such an incidence of something like that happening before. But the impossible had really come true this time around. One of the elders cowered back fearfully before turning his gaze over to the others and asking, "What did you all see?" "I saw a silhouette that towered even against the sky, an existence that seemed to encompass the entire world. It was almost as if that figure was the heavens themselves," an elder said. "That's exactly what I saw too. Could it be that Zhonshi has already achieved that level of strength?" The crowd gulped before they gasped in shock. Just what kind of realm had Zhonshi reached in order for the blessing he imprinted to harness such astounding power? Zhonshi has close ties with the old ancestors of the three sage clans, especially with the Zhong clan and the Luo clan. In fact, he was the witness to the betrothal of the young prodigy and the little princess. He surpassed Saint Nindan many years ago, reaching an unfathomable level in his cultivation. Furthermore, he possesses exceptional sensitivity towards souls and bloodlines, such that it would be no exaggeration to say that he's the #1 expert in that field in the world. Zhonshi said. "Other than him, I can think of no one else who wields the power to reduce the teacher acknowledgement hall to such a state and render every single one of us completely powerless." While most elders in the Sanctum of Sages might not know much about the elusive Grand Elder of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, as the Deputy Sanctum Head, Zhonshi still knew a thing or two. And honestly, other than that legendary man, he could not think of anyone else who could make them plummet completely helplessly from the sky with just his aura. Does this mean that he's really Zhongshi's butler? Elder Ge's body stiffened. That's most likely the case. Zhonshi nodded. Then, he turned to Elder Ge and berated him in displeasure. As Zhongshi's butler, it's natural for butler's son to put on airs, or else what would become of the strict hierarchy of order among the master teachers? Yet, you doubted him and forcefully dragged him over to the teacher acknowledgement hall to verify his identity. It's no wonder he was unhappy and reduced the entire place to such a state. Elder Ge, this is a mess that you caused, so you'd better put some thought into how you intend to resolve it. Would anyone in their right mind dare impersonate Zhongshi's butler? Considering the heavy price that one would have to pay once caught, No sane person would attempt to impersonate as Yangsha's butler. Yet, he just had to doubt Butler Sunday. Look at the good work you have done. The teacher acknowledgement hall has collapsed, and the several dozen millenniums of pride and honor of the sanctum of sages has been completely ruined. Yes. Elder Ge nodded with a bitter smile on his face. Gritting his teeth, he slowly walked toward to Sun Qiong, but before he could say a word, the latter had already put his hands behind his back once more and questioned with a haughty look on his face, "How is it? Have you verified my identity?" Of course. Elder Ge quickly nodded. "Humph. Your student tried to throw me out of the Hall of Integrity and pass a restraint order on me, and you forcefully brought me to the Hall of Acknowledgement in order to verify my identity. How do you think we should resolve this matter?" Sun Qiong asked with an authoritative tone. It was really fortunate that the young master had left a surge of zhenqi in his body, or else things would have gotten really awkward. Of course, it was impossible for the young master's zhenqi to be so formidable by itself. In his view, the old master must have left behind some kind of means within him that even he was oblivious to. But thinking over the matter once more, despite being a butler of the #1 figure in the master-teacher continent, he had actually been messed around by a minor figure like that. The more he thought about it, the more infuriated he became. "Butler son, Elder Ge was just ignorant of your identity, so if you could be so kind as to..." Zhonsha quickly stepped in and intervened. "I told him whom my old master is, but he chose to doubt my words instead. I, Sun Qiong, have traveled here step by step from the Tianqian kingdom, and I have braved countless storms. But this is the first time I have seen someone that conceited." Sun Qiong sneered coldly. If everyone were to behave in such a manner, what would become of Yangsha's authority? What would become of the Master-Teacher Pavilion's authority? This. Zhonsha frowned in a dilemma. While humility was celebrated among the Master-Teachers, there was still a need to regard the leaders of mankind with respect so as to not undermine their authority. If everyone disregarded the authority of those in power, it would be hard for the leaders of mankind to rally the populace together to fight against the otherworldly demonic tribe. Knowing that he was at fault for this incident, Elder Ge clenched his fists tightly and stepped forward. "Butler son, feel free to say what you want me to do. As long as it's within my means, consider it done. You are a master teacher whereas I am just a butler. I don't have the right to issue any punishment to you." Sun Qiong shot a glance at Elder Ge. There was a short pause before he waved his hand and continued. "However, if you wish to make reparations, it just happens that our young master is in dire need for pinnacle spirit stones. If you can bring some over, I think we can let this matter rest. Don't worry, I'll pay an equivalent price for the exchange. It's not my habit to blackmail or coerce others into things." Having followed Zhongxian for quite some time, as he came into contact with higher-ranked master teachers, he began to gain a deeper understanding of the rules concerning master teachers. It was true that even 8-star master teachers would have to show him respect out of deference to the old master, but ultimately, he still was not a master teacher, so he was not qualified to pass judgment upon them. It would be a breach of etiquette. That's simple, consider it done. Hearing that the other party just wanted to exchange for pinnacle spirit stones, Elder Ge immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He flicked his wrist, and a jade container materialized in his hand. "Here are 5 pinnacle spirit stones. Please consider them an apology for my undeserving disciples' insolent actions. If you wish to make any further exchange for pinnacle spirit stones, feel free to look for me. As long as it's not beyond 50 pinnacle spirit stones, I should be able to sort it for you." "You are a wise man." Sun Qiong nodded with a pleased smile on his face as he accepted the jade container. The very purpose of his visit was to acquire the pinnacle spirit stones, and not only did he gain 5 of them for free, he was even given the right to exchange for them whenever. This outcome was one that he was extremely content with. At the same time, he could not help but think how convenient it was when there was someone above that he could rely on. Had these master teachers not found the old master's blessing in him, putting aside earning these pinnacle spirit stones, he might not even have been allowed to walk out of there alive. Seeing that the conflict was resolved, Zhonsha stepped forward and asked with a smile, "Butler son, if I may, what level of cultivation has Yangsha reached, and where is he at the moment?" The imposing figure that he had seen earlier was simply too frightening, such that his heart was still beating in trepidation. Could Yang She have really crossed that bottleneck and achieved that unfathomable realm? Our old master has always been a rather elusive figure, and even I don't have any means of contacting him. Usually, he's the one who looks for me instead. I'm also not too sure on the specifics regarding how powerful he is either, but I do know that the strength he wields has reached a level far beyond anyone's gauge, such that it's no exaggeration to say that he's unrivaled in this world. When speaking of Yang Xian, a brilliant gleam lit up in Sun Qiong's eyes, and his voice grew conspicuously agitated. Despite his overwhelming strength, the old master still remained amiable and compassionate, and this left him deeply in awe. Yang She is truly a person worthy of respect. Zhang She nodded. Just as he was about to continue speaking, an elder beside him suddenly rushed up to him with a bizarre look on his face. Zhang She, there's someone looking for you outside. Looking for me? Zhang She frowned. Who is it? As the deputy sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, a Saint Nine Dan expert, he was not a figure whom just anyone could meet. The elder shot a glance at Sun Qiong, and his lips twitched slightly. Then, with a slightly awkward tone, he said, "That person claims that he is Yang She's butler." Chapter 1398 The Real Butler 2 Why Yang She's butler? Which Yang She? Zhang She was stunned by the elder's report. It's Yang Xian, the elder replied. Zhang She froze on the spot. They had finally recognized the plump man standing before them as Yang She's butler when another one popped up all of a sudden. Was this some kind of elaborate prank working against them? When did the position of Yang She's butler become so worthless that one could be found at every turn? What's going on? Zhang She sent a telepathic message privately to the elder. What the heck was this? This was the Sanctum of Sages, not some guess who Yang She's real butler is event venue. For Yang She's butlers to pop up one after another, were they trying to stress him to death? I have no idea. My student just sent me the message. At which, the elder suddenly paused for a brief moment before continuing on. Furthermore, it seems like the person is someone whom you are acquainted with. Someone whom I am acquainted with? Zhang She was bewildered by those words. While he had heard of many affairs surrounding Yang She, most of them were concerning official matters instead of the latter's private life. On top of that, he had not had the honor of meeting the latter in person. Thus, he was not familiar with the latter's personal relations. For example, he had not even heard of such butler son prior to this matter. So, it was really perplexing to him that another one of Yang She's butlers would pop up and all of a sudden claim that he was acquainted with him. That's right. Do you still remember who Yiwei? The elder replied telepathically. You are speaking of the Thousand Hands poison monarch Hu Yiwei? Zhang She subconsciously tightened his fists upon hearing that name. That's right, it's him. The elder nodded grimly. The top echelon of the Poison Hall headquarters is classified by the 2 guardians, 4 eminences, 12 poison kings, and 72 Tier 1 hall masters. As the left guardian of the Poison Hall, Hu Yiwei's name is often raised alongside right guardian Shenju, and is known for his exceptional mastery of poison. Recalling the history surrounding Hu Yiwei, an involuntary shudder ran through Zhang She's body. It said that his mastery of poison has already reached a level so high that he could even plant poison within an embryo through the mother's body without harming either of the two, cursing the child to a life of suffering. The poisons that he concocts are so potent and powerful that even 9-star physicians would find themselves completely helpless before them. Indeed, there was a period of time when he wreaked havoc in the master-teacher continent, poisoning every single person that he came by. Eventually, the master-teacher pavilion headquarters were forced to dispatch their forces to surround and take him down. If I recall correctly, Zhang She, you were involved in that operation back then, right? The elder asked. That's right, I did participate in that operation. Combining the forces dispatched by the master-teacher pavilion headquarters, Sanctum of Sages, and Combat Master Hall, there was a total of 9 Saint Ninden experts in total. We managed to corner him at an ancient city, and we set up an unbreachable trap in order to force him to surrender. Yet, Who could have thought that the fellow would actually manage to forcefully break out of our defenses through the sheer potency of his poison? 6 of the Saint 9 Dan experts died on the spot, and it's only by a stroke of luck that I managed to survive the ordeal. As Jean recalled the affairs that had happened back then, hostility rippled in his eyes, and he seemed to grow slightly agitated. It is due to that lethal poison that my cultivation hasn't progressed at all for the past 20 years, stagnating at Saint 9 Dan primary stage. After that matter, the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters organized a couple more operations, but the cunning Hu Yiwei managed to get away each time. However, all news surrounding him abruptly stopped 2 months afterward, and he has not been seen since then. There are rumors saying that he encountered Yang Shi, and the latter subdued him and made him his subordinate, the elder said. Due to the vast implications of the matter, the operations conducted over the past 2 decades had been kept confidential among the top brass of the Master Teacher Pavilion. As such, those who had not participated in those operations would never know of these matters. Yuan, I have heard of that rumor, too. No matter how powerful Hu Yiwei is, there's no way he would stand a chance against the powerful Yang Shi. If that man who is requesting to meet me is really Hu Yiwei, then there might just be some credibility to the rumors, Jean said. While he harbored deep anger toward the Hu Yiwei, if it was true that the latter had become Yang Shi's subordinate, he would have no choice but to forsake all thoughts of exacting vengeance. It was true that the Thousand Hands Poison Monarch had erred greatly in the past, but if Yang Shi could guarantee that the other party would use his powers to contribute to mankind in the future, that would surely be preferable to killing the other party. After all, Saint 9 Dan experts were not easy to come by, and mankind was in need of all the strength it could get in order to deal with the otherworldly demonic tribe. The rumors that Yang Shi had subdued Hu Yiwei had spread like wildfire at one point in time, but there had been no concrete evidence then to determine the authenticity of the rumor. As such, they could only take the matter with a pinch of salt. But, who would have thought that it would actually be real? You're right. The elder hesitated for a brief moment before asking, should we invite him in? Since he's Yang Shi's butler, he should be acquainted with Butler Sun over here. It would be good to allow them to interact with one another, and perhaps, we just might be able to determine the cause of the peculiar situation earlier, Jean said. Only someone as powerful as Yang Shi could have the strength to possibly make the vicious Hu Yiwei bow in submission. If the person requesting an audience with him was truly Hu Yiwei, there should be little doubt that he was really Yang Shi's butler. After all, why else would someone as esteemed as the left guardian of the Poison Hall claim that he was the butler of a master teacher? That would only be lowering his standing. Considering how the plump man before him was Yang Shi's butler as well, there was a good chance that the both of them knew one another. All right. The elder nodded before leaving the room. Some time later, he returned with a grey-robed elder behind him. This elder had particularly thick eyebrows, and there was a gloomy tone to his eyes, making it hard for one to read his emotions. His true cultivation was buried deep within his body, making it impossible for one to accurately gauge his strength. However, based on what Jean had said, he was likely to be a Saint 9 Dan expert at the very minimum. Hu Yiwei walked right up to Jean and said with a slight smile, Jean Tiancheng, we meet once more. Indeed, we meet once more, Jean said with narrowed eyes as he tried his best to suppress his fury. You need not get angry. I was the left guardian of the Poison Hall back then, so it's a given that we would attempt to kill one another. But since I have become Yang Shi's butler, we can be considered allies standing on the same front now. There's no reason for you to view me hostilely, Hu Yiwei said. Indeed, there's no reason for that anymore. Jean shook his head. May I know the reason behind your visit? If there's nothing much, why don't I show you the way out? Don't be so quick to send me off. Why don't you take a look at this first? Perhaps, it might change your mind. Hu Yiwei flicked his finger, and a jade bottle flew over. Jean casually grabbed the jade bottle and pried it open. A moment later, his eyes narrowed. Is this the antidote to the poison in my body? Ever since becoming afflicted with the poison from the other party 20 years ago, he had sought out countless physicians, but none of them had been able to do anything about it. As a result of that, he had been unable to advance his cultivation. It was exactly for this reason that he was filled with rage for the other party. Yet, who would have thought that the other party would deliver the antidote right to him? Indeed. My master wishes me to cure all those patients whom I have poisoned over the years. Even though the poison you were afflicted with wasn't too severe, it still must have caused you quite some suffering over the years. Thus, I hope to make it up to you one way or another, Hu Yiwei explained. Help me relay my thanks to Yang Shi. With Zhang Shi's eye of discernment, he was able to tell whether the antidote was real or not with just a single glance, and he could hardly control his excitement with the cure to his long-term affliction right in his hands. He hurriedly placed it into his storage ring before recalling the other matter he had in mind, so he gestured to Sun Qiong and said, "Right, why don't I introduce the both of you to one another? This gentleman over here is also Yang Shi's butler, Sun Qiong. Butler Sun, this elder over here is Hu Yiwei, Yang Shi's butler. Well, I guess the both of you should be acquainted with one another, right?" Yang Shi's butler? Hu Yiwei frowned in doubt. I am the only butler that Yang Shi has. How could there be another butler? On the other hand, Sun Qiong's eyebrows shot up upon hearing those words, and displeasure surfaced on his face. Little Jean, you said that he's the old master's butler too? You must be joking with me, after which, he turned his sights to Hu Yiwei and bellowed, preposterous. How dare you impersonate the old master's butler? Men, take him down. Chapter 1399 Sun Qiong's wrath. A wave of silence swept across the room. The teeth of every single elder in the room were clattering non-stop, and they looked at Sun Qiong as if they were looking at a monster. The grey-robed elder wielded strength that even Zhang Shi could not match, and yet, that plump man actually said that the other party was preposterous and even commanded for others to take him down. Even if we want to take him down, we need the strength to do so first. If we really attempt to do so, every single one of us will probably be poisoned to the ground by the end of today. On the other hand, Hu Yiwei was taken aback for an instant before his eyes narrowed into thin slits. What did you say? He had been following Yang Shi for more than 20 years now, and he knew very well whether the latter had more butlers and subordinates or not. In fact, he was the one who dealt with almost all of the miscellaneous matters. It was one thing for him to have never met the plump man standing before him, but to think that the other party would dare speak to him in such a manner. Are you deaf? Didn't you hear what I said? Sun Qiong waved his hand in impatience. Speak. What's your motive for pretending to be the old master's butler? You might have been able to get away with it if you did it elsewhere, but it seems that you have lucked out. You never thought that you would meet me, Yang Shi's real butler, Real butler? Sensing the complete lack of nervousness within Sun Qiong while saying those words, Hu Yiwei could not help but turn his gaze to Zhang Shi. Zhang Tiancheng, who is this fellow? You don't know one another? Zhang Shi's lips twitched. He had thought that as fellow butlers of Yang Shi, the both of them should have been acquainted with one another. Yet, who could have thought that a meeting between the both of them would end up so tense instead? It was not only the case that the both of them hadn't met one another, it was more like they did not even know of each other's existence. This almost felt like a wife meeting the mistress for the first time. Am I supposed to know every insignificant person out there in the world? Hu Yiwei flung his sleeves coldly. His master was one of the strongest experts in the master-teacher continent, and even the weakest cultivator in his social circle was at Saint Nine Dan at minimum. Given so, how could his master possibly take a fellow who was not even at the Saint realm yet as his butler? He claims to be Yang Shi's butler, and we validated his identity through the teacher acknowledgement hall earlier. Yang Shi has indeed imprinted his blessing on him, Zhang Shi explained. The person who had imprinted a blessing onto Sun Qiong was an expert far stronger than their imaginations. Other than Yang Shi, they could think of no other person who was powerful enough for that. He possesses my master's blessing. Hu Yiwei was taken aback by those words. He turned his gaze toward the plump man by the side once more, and deep creases slowly etched themselves onto his forehead. My master is a person who values peace and quietness, such that he has only taken in a single student to date. Given that, how could he possibly take you in as his butler? Fatty, explain yourself. Even if Yang Shi wanted to take in a butler, he would at least take in someone who was much more qualified. There was simply no reason he would take in a person as weak as the fatty before him as his butler. Audacious. How dare you question our old master's judgment? Naturally, he has his own considerations for making his decisions. Or could it be that you feel that our old master is accountable to you for every decision that he makes? Sun Qiong waved his hand and harumphed coldly. He turned around and sat back down on the main seat in the room before continuing. There's no point wasting any more time here. Hurry up and confess your identity and the reason you are impersonating as our old master's butler. What the heck was this? People nowadays sure were getting more and more arrogant. How in the world could a fake like the other party possibly have the cheek and the courage to stand before him without the slightest hint of fear? Not to mention, to even be putting on such an act in the sanctum of sages. His audacity was truly incredible. Impersonating? Hu Yiwei nearly exploded on the spot. Do you know who I am? Had it been in the past, he definitely would have poisoned the other party to death for daring to conduct himself so arrogantly before him. As the left guardian of the poison hall, possibly the top poison practitioner in the world, how could he allow another man to insult him in such a manner? Do I look like I give a damn as to who you are? Sun Qiong replied with a deeply annoyed tone. Rather, do you know who I am? Our old master is one of the grand elders of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters and very possibly the strongest expert in the world. As his butler, I have the responsibility to uphold his dignity and standing. Yet, a mere impersonator like you actually dares to question me in such a manner. I hate to say this, but are you tired of living? To think that even a mere impersonator would speak to him so arrogantly. It seemed like even the world was not a big enough place to house the other party's ego anymore. Even though Hu Yiwei was on the verge of erupting, he still suppressed his rage and harumphed. You claim that Yang Shi is your master, but do you have any evidence of it? After years of listening to Yang Shi's teachings, his temper had cooled down significantly. Had anyone dared to speak to him in such a manner in the past, he would have flipped the entire sanctum of sages upside down. Evidence. Little Jean has already verified it earlier. The old master's blessing is right within me. Instead of speaking of me, why don't you take a look at yourself instead? Do you have any evidence to prove your identity? Who doesn't know how to make empty claims? Why don't you show some evidence first before pointing your finger at others? Sun Qiong sneered coldly. He had used the young master's junshi in order to clear the identity examination, but given that the young master was the old master's direct disciple, that could also be considered a method of the old master, so it was not entirely inaccurate to say that he possessed Yang Shi's blessing. You. Unwilling to waste his breath on futile explanations, Hu Yiwei flicked his wrist and whipped out a token. This is the token that my master has given to me. Token. Zhang Shi and the others quickly turned their gazes over, and very soon, they nodded in approval. That's a token specially crafted by the Master Teacher Pavilion. Indeed, it belongs to Yang Shi. There's no way to fake that. As elders of the Sanctum of Sages, they would never make a mistake with something as important as this. It's real. Sun Qiong was stunned for an instant before hurriedly snatching the token to take a look. The token was roughly the size of one's palm. The majestic insignia of the Master Teacher Pavilion was imprinted on the front, and the back was a Yang character written in seal script. It was difficult to determine what material it was made of, but just from the solemn and heavy air that it exuded, it was apparent that the token was no weaker than any Saint high-tier artifact. Putting aside whether the token was real or not, just the very material and craftsmanship of the token made it a highly valuable commodity, and not to mention, one could still vaguely feel the unique aura of the Master Teacher Pavilion within it. To think that the old master didn't give one to me. The more Sun Qiong stared at the token, the more indignant he felt. This is too much. Isn't the old master too biased? It's one thing that he dumped the young master on me to take care of, but he actually didn't leave anything for me either. This is really unfair. As your student, I understand why you might want to cultivate independence in the young master and thus didn't want to interfere in his growth too much, but I'm your butler. Not only did you not give me any money or a blessing, you even gave someone else such a good token instead of me. We're both your butlers, but why does it seem like I'm your step-butler instead? This won't do. The next time I meet the old master, I must really talk sense into him. At the very least, I should receive at least 1 or 2 tokens from him. Otherwise, how am I supposed to uphold my pride, my dignity, if everyone doubts my identity? As the butler of the man who stands at the top of the master-teacher pavilion headquarters, I need to at least maintain a front that's worthy of my standing so that I don't bring shame to the old master's name. Seeing the look on Sun Chong's face, Hu Yiwei harumphed coldly. How is it? Can this token prove my identity? Even though Sun Chong felt deeply indignant inside, he still swiftly regained his poise and calmly replied, well, since little Jean and the others have already verified the token to be real, I guess you are indeed a butler of the old master as well. Considering how powerful and expert the old master was, it was understandable that he would have other butlers behind his back. As the main butler, he needed to be understanding and magnanimous to the old master's needs. Ever since I became the old master's subordinate, I have followed closely in his footsteps, never leaving his side. Tell me, why am I unaware of your existence? Hu Yiwei flicked his token back into his storage ring before gazing at Sun Chong coldly. Do you think that you are truly capable of following every single one of the old master's moves with your current capabilities? Sun Chong sneered coldly before slowly raising his head to look into the distance, seemingly reminiscing the old days. The old master picked me out from the market, saying that he was in awe of my character and temperament. He tasked me with taking care of the young master and protecting him till he matures. It was then that I made the decision to serve as his butler for life. But those are matters back from very long ago, so there's no point bringing them back up now. Right, you mentioned earlier that you are the old master's butler. Since that's the case, you should just listen to my commands from now on. It's fine, you don't have to feel touched. It's my responsibility to share the burden of the old master in taking care of the other subordinates. Chapter 1400 Can't be poisoned to death. Back when he was still in the Qianqian kingdom, Sun Qiong had been with the old master for quite some time, but he had never heard that the old master had another butler. Had he known this earlier, he would not have tired himself out like this. He could simply have ordered this fellow around to get things done. After all, he was the butler whom the old master had entrusted the young master to, so it went without saying that his standing had to be higher. You want me to listen to your commands? Hearing those words, Hu Yiwei's cheeks twitched wildly, and he nearly rushed forward to strangle the other party to death. Could you be any more shameless? Even if I have concealed my cultivation, you should be able to tell how powerful I am from Zhonshi and the others' attitude, right? I am a figure whom others would faint in the face of, and yet, you actually dare to say such words to me. Are you really that brave, or are your eyes that bad? Indeed. You are only a subordinate in charge of handling the old master's miscellaneous affairs, whereas I am butler whom the old master has recognized and entrusted great responsibility to. Shouldn't it be your honor to listen to my commands? Sun Qiong nodded matter-of-factly. After all, it was clear that the other party was a mere subordinate in charge of handling miscellaneous affairs. On the other hand, he was a butler who had been entrusted with a direct disciple. Given so, was it not obvious which of the two of them was of higher standing? A subordinate might still require a token for others to validate their identity, but as the real butler, it went without saying that he did not need such a thing. With such a thought in mind, Sun Qiong suddenly felt his indignation subsiding significantly, and his pride swelled once more. You want me to listen to your commands? Luo Luo. Hu Yiwei clenched his teeth tightly together as a hint of killing intent flashed across his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he inconspicuously sent a surge of poison into the plump man's body as he thought callously, sure, as long as you can survive this. After which, he decisively turned his gaze toward the elder, not wanting to waste any more of his breath on a dead man. Zhonshi, I have accompanied the young master here this time. He has already successfully enrolled in the Sanctum of Sages, so my mission is already complete, and there's no reason for me to stay here anymore. The reason I'm paying a visit right now is to request for you to take good care of him. My master has very high expectations of the young master. But before Zhonshi could respond, a loud voice suddenly interjected. There's no need for you to worry. I'll take care of the young master well. Hu Yiwei's eyes widened in astonishment upon hearing that voice. He quickly turned his gaze over and saw Sun Qiong waving his hand calmly. How is this possible? Hu Yiwei's heart jolted in shock. The poison he had used was so potent that even an expert of Zhonshi's caliber would bleed from his 7 apertures once afflicted with it. Considering the dose that he had injected into the plump man's body, how could he possibly remain completely fine and even speak so energetically? Was this for real? What do you mean by that? Not knowing the peril that he had just been through, Sun Qiong waved his hand derisively and harumphed. If not for me taking care of the young master along the way, how could he have become a student of the Sanctum of Sages so easily? You needn't worry about anything. The young master is in good hands. Hearing how the plump man was speaking with increasing fervor, completely devoid of the weakened state that a poisoned man should be in, Hu Yiwei narrowed his eyes grimly. Unable to believe what was happening before him, he discreetly flicked his finger a few more times, sending more surges of poison into the other party's body. Even though his temperament had calmed down over the years under Yangshi's teachings, the plump man before him had simply gone too far, stomping right across his bottom line. As a Saint Nine Den expert, there was no way he could allow a weakling to humiliate him like that. Woo woo woo. In an instant, the few most lethal poisons that Hu Yiwei had with him were injected right into Sun Qiong's body. Enough. Is there any point in you flicking your fingers again and again? Are you hearing what I'm saying, or are you playing deaf with me? As a subordinate, you should know your place. It's no wonder the old master is unwilling to entrust greater responsibilities to you. Sun Qiong flung his sleeves in disapproval. He had been speaking nicely to the other party all this while, but that fellow just had to flick things at him again and again, provoking the zhenqi that the young master had left within his body to surge all around the place. Don't you know about respecting your seniors? Or do you think that I have mellowed out so much over the year that you feel that you can climb over my head? Otherwise, would you dare to act so brazenly before me? It seems like you are really mistaking my kindness for weakness. You. Seeing that there was really no sign of the other party being poisoned, Hu Yiwei's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. The poisons that he had flicked into the plump man's body earlier were the most potent that he possessed. Even Yangsha had to struggle a bit to deal with them, and yet, the other party was actually completely fine before them. Could it be that the plump man really was not as weak as he seemed? Was he actually a formidable expert in disguise? Just a while ago, he had met with a lady, whom despite her young age, was able to subdue him with ease. Furthermore, he had heard that the founder of the Poison Hall had returned recently, and she seemed to be a young lass, too. All of this taught him to never judge a person by their appearance. Not to mention, his master's eye of discernment had always been exceptional. Most likely, there was a deeper reason as to why he chose this crude plump man as his butler. After all, there was no reason for his master to recruit a useless man into his service. In an instant, the silhouette of the plump man whom he had been looking down at all this while suddenly grew towering. Zhonsha had noticed Hu Yiwei's actions, but seeing that Sun Qiong remained completely unharmed, he thought that Hu Yiwei had decided against it in the end. Heaving a sigh of relief on the inside, he hurriedly asked, I'll definitely take good care of Yangsha's student. He's a freshman who cleared this examination just earlier this year, right? May I know his name? Zhongxian. Fengzi. Sun Qiong and Hu Yiwei spoke simultaneously. Zhongxian. Before Zhonshe could respond, Hu Yiwei had already turned to look at Sun Qiong with a deep frown. My master only has a single student, and his name is Fengzi. Who in the world is the Zhongxian you speak of? All those who were close with Yangshe would know that he had only officially accepted a single student in his lifetime, and that person was Fengzi. That was the young master whom he had been speaking of, and he had been following the other party all this while in order to protect him from the shadows, ensuring that he arrived at the Sanctum of Sages safely. As for that Zhongxian, he had never heard of this person before. It was one thing for him to have never heard of his master taking in another butler, but would it not be truly ridiculous if he remained oblivious to his master taking in another student as well? Fengzi and our young master are from the same lineage. They have already met one another, and they even had a friendly spar. Sun Qiong waved his hand as he explained with a smile. From the looks of it, it seems like he has already become our young master's junior. So, that fellow was in charge of taking care of Feng Zi. That would explain everything. He had thought that it was weird when that fellow talked about how he had accompanied the young master here. It turned out that the young masters they were talking about were referring to different individuals. Based on what he knew of Zhongxian, the latter would surely have Feng Zi pummeled till Feng Zi willingly addressed him as senior. Junior. Hu Yiwei froze on the spot. We could have been spared from all that trouble if you had just mentioned Feng Zi's name earlier. I wouldn't have doubted you if that was the case. Since we are all working for the old master, we should at least try to get along with one another. Seeing that Hu Yiwei still had an uncomprehending frown on his forehead, Sun Qiong continued explaining with a smile. For an expert as powerful as the old master, it's perfectly normal for him to take in a couple of students and butlers outside without informing you. After all, as subordinates, it's not our place to inquire too much into our master's affairs. He knew full well how low profile the old master was. For one, despite knowing the old master for more than a year now, he would still have been oblivious to how incredible of a figure the old master was if not for Zhong Jiuxiao's explanation a while ago. Hu Yiwei was stifled into silence. With how confidently the plump man was speaking, and given that the other party had cleared Zhong Shi and the other's verification and even his most potent of poisons could not kill the other party, he suddenly felt deeply uncertain on the inside. He might have been accompanying Yangshe for the past few years, but in the end, he was just a subordinate. There were still some matters that he was not privy to. Could it be that his master had really taken in another student and butler behind his back? His initial intention had just been to request Zhong Shi to take care of Feng Zi, but in a weird twist of fate, it somehow turned into a reunion event. Chapter 1401. His name is Zhongxian, to share the same position as an insignificant figure who had not even reached the Saint Realm yet. Hu Yiwei suddenly felt deeply stifled on the inside. Forget it, I'll just ask my master when I return later on. Hu Yiwei knew that he would only be lowering his status if he were to argue with a nobody. Furthermore, there was just a chance that what the other party said was true. If that was the case, his actions would only lead to others mocking Yangshe for being unable to keep his subordinates in check, thus bringing shame to his master. Thus, he remained silent. However, as the indignation suffocating his chest continued to grow, he was eventually unable to keep his poise and harumphed. Young Master Feng Zi is an extraordinarily talented individual. Even if the Zhongxian person you spoke of is a direct disciple of my master, too, there is little doubt that young Master Feng Zi is the senior. Feng Zi was an extremely talented individual, such that even the core members of top sage clans would struggle to remain on par with him. On top of that, he was a hard-working person as well, knowing that he had to work hard to achieve what he wanted in life. It was due to the combination of his unyielding diligence and his superior talent that he was able to achieve the cultivation of Saint Seven Dan Phantasmal Space Realm despite only being in his 20s. Even if that Zhongxian fellow was Yangshe's student as well, there was no way he could possibly best Feng Zi's accomplishment. Our young master has never been defeated by his peers. Sun Qiong waved his hand confidently. He had been with the young master for so long, but when had the latter ever allowed himself to suffer the slightest grievance? Those who dared stand against the young master eventually ended up becoming his student or grandstudent, or else they would find their reputation completely shattered, stripped of their master-teacher identity even. No matter how powerful that Feng Zi fellow was, there was no way he could hold a candle to the young master. Hearing the plump man's boasting, Hu Yiwei could not help but frown in displeasure. Your young master has never been defeated by his peers. Humph. That's only because he hasn't met our young master yet. In the younger generation, the most talented offspring of the sage clans was indubitably Zhongyu, but even he was nothing compared to Feng Zi. Even if that Zhongxian fellow the other party spoke of was truly powerful, there was no way he would be a match for Feng Zi. Not wanting to waste his breath with the obstinate old man, Sun Qiong harumphed. It's pointless for you to quibble about it here. You'll know the answer very soon. In the midst of his words, however, an anxious voice suddenly interrupted them. Elder Ge, a disaster has occurred. Following which, An elder rushed into the room in a fluster. Seeing that the person who had rushed into the room was a managerial elder of the Hall of Integrity, Elder Ge asked with a frown, "What's wrong?" For an elder to fly into such a fluster, something huge must have occurred. It's the bunch from the Physician Guild." All of them suddenly came to the Hall of Integrity as a group under Divine Healer by Yu's lead, and for some reason, they actually managed to make breakthroughs in their cultivation simultaneously. Now, we have more than a dozen elders undergoing the dimension sundering ordeal. Due to the close proximity of their locations, the lightning tribulations began fusing together with one another, and they are showing signs of running amok. The elder reported with a pale face. They managed to make breakthroughs in their cultivation simultaneously. You said that the lightning tribulations began fusing together with one another? Everyone jolted on the spot upon hearing that news. Even Jean-Charles' eyes were widening in utter horror, unable to believe what he had just heard. The might of a lightning tribulation was, by no means, constant. If two people were to make a breakthrough simultaneously in close proximity to one another, the might of the lightning tribulation that they would draw in would not be as simple as just 1 + 1 = 2. Rather, the resonance between the lightning tribulations could cause the might of the lightning tribulation to compound to 4 or even more. For this reason, cultivators would always avoid making a breakthrough at the same time as others, especially when the breakthrough would bring about a cultivation ordeal. Even if two cultivators had to make a breakthrough simultaneously, they would attempt to distance themselves from one another as much as possible so as to reduce the chances of the lightning tribulation fusing with one another. Once any fusion occurred, the possibility of success would be near zero. Yet, the Physician Guild actually had more than a dozen of their elders achieve breakthroughs simultaneously. As if that was not bad enough, they just had to make their breakthrough in the Hall of Integrity. Just what did the Hall of Integrity do to you all to treat us like that? Will you only be content after reducing us to rubble? I know most of the managerial elders in the Physician Guild. While most of them are indeed at St. Seven Dan Phantasmal Space Realm, a huge proportion of them have been stuck at the realm for many years, such that any chances of a breakthrough would have been bleak at most. Why would they suddenly achieve a breakthrough together? Jean-Charles frowned in incomprehension. Due to the poison that he had been afflicted with by Hu Yiwei, he often frequented the Physician Guild, and the elders had been collaborating together to study the poison in his body as well. Thus, over time, they had grown rather close to one another. Most of the managerial elders had been too reliant on medicinal herbs and pills to push up their cultivation in their earlier years, which resulted in a lot of medicinal dregs being left behind in their meridians and veins. On top of that, too many years had gone by, and their vitality had already withered, thus making it nigh impossible for them to make a breakthrough anymore. Why would they suddenly achieve a breakthrough all at once? It was completely illogical. The elder pondered for a moment as he reminisced on the sight that he had seen earlier before replying. I have no idea. According to the rumors, it seems Divine Healer by You invited a freshman who is exceptionally skilled in medicine to conduct a lecture for them, but instead of conducting a lecture, the freshman offered them pointers on the various flaws they had in their cultivation, and this insight seems to have helped them to overcome their bottlenecks. Freshman offered them pointers. Helped over a dozen St. Seven Dan cultivators overcome their bottlenecks simultaneously? The crowd froze upon hearing those words. Even Hu Yiwei was completely flabbergasted by what he had just heard. Even his master, Yang Shu, would have great difficulty making more than a dozen St. Seven Dan pinnacle cultivators achieve a breakthrough simultaneously. That is second-hand news that I have heard from the personnel in the Physician Guild, so I'm not too sure about the exact situation myself. However, with more than a dozen on them achieving a breakthrough simultaneously, the lightning tribulation has already grown to a scale that spans over 5,000 mu. Not even the formation in the Hall of Integrity can withstand something of this scale, the elder exclaimed anxiously. Let's go take a look. Knowing that there was no time to waste for this matter, Elder Ge hurriedly got up and rushed toward the Hall of Integrity. Jean-Charles and the others quickly followed behind him. Sun Qiong hesitated for a brief moment before tagging along as well. With how huge the matter was, the very first thought that came to his mind actually turned out to be the young master. It could not be that this was really the doing of the young master, could it? It did not take long for the crowd to arrive at the Hall of Integrity. Looking at the ominous storm clouds looming over them in sky, covering the sun completely, everyone could not help but feel a little crazed inside. It was true that the Hall of Integrity was the ideal place for any cultivator to face their cultivation ordeal in, but this was way out of proportion. If it really fell, the entire Hall of Integrity could very well be zapped into ashes. Elder Ge shuddered involuntarily in the face of the hulking lightning tribulation before him. In this instant, he could not help but marvel and, at the same time, fear the sheer prowess of the natural world. He turned his gaze to Zhonshi anxiously and asked, "Zhonshi, what should we do?" It was just a moment ago that the teacher acknowledgement hall had been reduced to rubble. If something happened to the Hall of Integrity as well, he might as well retire from being an elder right now. "I have no idea." Zhonshi shook his head grimly. If the lightning tribulation had been any smaller, he might still have been able to forcefully dissipate it with his strength as a Saint 9 Dan primary stage expert. However, what was before him had already grown to a scale of 5,000 mu. Its might was so great that it could wipe him off the face of this world easily, so how was he supposed to dissipate it? If it really comes down to it, we might have to activate the Sanctum Custodian formation of the Sanctum of Sages, Elder Ge said grimly. Sanctum Custodian formation? That won't do. As anxious Zhonshi was, he still rejected Elder Ge's proposition. The formation should only be used in the worst-case scenario, when the survival of the Sanctum of Sages is at stake. As powerful as the lightning tribulation is, it hasn't reached that point yet. The Sanctum Custodian formation of the Sanctum of Sages had been built painstakingly by generations of predecessors. Unless the Sanctum of Sages was on the verge of destruction, they were not to activate it. As despairing as the massive congregation of ominous clouds was, it had not reached the level where the Sanctum Custodian formation could be activated. If we don't activate it, the Hall of Integrity will be a goner, Elder Ge exclaimed in panic. Zhonshi's complexion turned awful. He pondered for a moment, but he was still unable to come up with a viable alternative solution. However, another thought came to his mind instead, and he hurriedly turned his gaze toward the elder who had reported the incident to them previously. What is the name of the freshman who offered pointers to the dozen elders from the Physician Guild earlier, and where is he? Considering the freshman's ability to make more than a dozen Saint 7 Dan pinnacle cultivators achieve a breakthrough simultaneously through his teachings, there was a chance that he just might have a way to deal with this stupendously massive lightning tribulation. I have no idea where he is at the moment, but I think I heard someone mentioning his name earlier. The elder contemplated deeply for a moment before finally continuing. His name should be Zhong Xian. 1 mu equals 666. 6 square meters. Chapter 1402 Zhong Xian is electrocuted. Zhong Xian? Zhonshi was taken aback by that name. He had just heard that name earlier. Was that not the name of the plump butler's young master, Yangshi's direct disciple? The rest of the crowd were visibly startled as well. They turned to look at the plump butler standing not too far away, and to their surprise, not only was the latter not astounded by what he was seeing, he even seemed to be heaving a sigh of relief. To Sun Qiong, relief was indeed the emotion that he was feeling. He knew that there was no one other than the young master who would dare toy with such a thing. In fact, he only would have been shocked if the culprit behind this had not been the young master. Some days in his life, he could not help but feel really helpless at the plight he was in. All he wanted was to quietly fulfill his responsibilities as a butler, living a humble and peaceful life. But as if fate had played a trick on him, he just had to be paired with such a troublemaking young master. Given how much the matter had blown up this time around, even he would have trouble resolving this dispute. With such thoughts in mind, Sun Qiong slowly closed his eyes as resignation crept onto his face. Low profile, these were the 2 words that the young master chanted every single day, but honestly speaking, everything that the latter did was simply contrary to those 2 words. In a way, it felt as if he was trying to humble brag about his abilities. It had really been hard on him over the past few months having to support such a person. But again, if it was an easy task, The old master would have entrusted the young master to Hu Yiwei instead of him. Upon learning the culprit behind the matter, Elder Ge was unable to hold back his rage any longer and roared furiously at Sun Qiong. Just what the heck is your young master trying to do by making dozens of people achieve a breakthrough simultaneously? This. Sun Qiong scratched his head awkwardly. To be honest, even after the many months that he had spent with the young master, he was still unable to fathom the latter's thoughts. This isn't the time to be pursuing responsibility for this matter, Zhonshu instructed severely. We need to hurry up and find the elders who are making a breakthrough this instant and convince them to suppress their cultivation and relocate before facing their cultivation order. It would be impossible to make a cultivation ordeal disappear once it had been summoned, but it was still possible to delay the falling of the lightning tribulation by suppressing one's cultivation temporarily. As long as they could buy sufficient time to get all of them to relocate, there was a chance they could undo the fusion of the lightning tribulations. Boom. But before Zhonshu could finish his words, a powerful shockwave suddenly rippled into the surroundings, and at the same time, a powerful burst of energy shot forth toward the storm clouds. Voila! The powerful burst of energy seemed to have successfully provoked the storm clouds. In the blink of an eye, the congregation of the storm clouds grew even denser and vaster. Seeing such a sight, everyone anxiously turned their gazes toward where the powerful burst of energy had originated, and their complexions immediately darkened. It was from a Saint 8 Dan Pinnacle Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast. With a crazed look on its face, it was furiously sending more and more bursts of energy toward the storm clouds, almost as if it would not rest until the entire world was reduced to ash. The hell? Where in the world did that fellow pop out from? What the heck are the rest of you idling around for? Hurry up and stop it. Elder Ge bellowed with a tone intermixed with fury and panic. At the same time, he swiftly dashed forward to stop the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast from worsening the situation, but before he could come close to the latter, an elder who had been standing on top of the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast suddenly leaped up and sent a devastating surge of sword chi toward the storm clouds. Catcher! Catcher! That attack brought about an immediate response from the lightning tribulation. In an instant, the 5,000 mu of storm clouds expanded to over 6,000 mu. Upon getting a closer look of the elder's face, Elder Ge shrieked in horror. Bai Yu, are you insane? The elder who had just launched the devastating surge of sword chi was none other than divine healer Bai Yu. As a physician, Bai Yu was a man who had great compassion for all living beings in the world, such that he would hesitate to even crush an ant. Why would someone like that proactively seek to strengthen the lightning tribulation? If my Hall of Integrity has wronged you in any way, we can always talk things out. There's no need for you to go this far. At this moment, divine healer Bai Yu, in the midst of his furious assault toward the storm clouds, suddenly caught sight of Elder Ge and the others, and his eyes immediately lit up. Ge Xiong, you are here. Great. Hurry up. Come and help me attack the lightning tribulation. Zhonshu, you're here as well? Wonderful. Quick, we need help attacking the lightning tribulation. We need to act fast. It will be too late once the lightning bolt falls. Attack the lightning tribulation? Elder Ge and Zhonshu widened their eyes upon hearing those words. They exchanged glances with one another, and they could see confusion in the depths of each other's eyes. Had that fellow gone mad from treating too many patients? The more the lightning tribulation was attacked, the stronger the lightning bolt falling would be. At this rate, everyone would be electrocuted to death. Hoo. Just as the crowd was completely bewildered by what divine healer Bai Yu was up to, the furious whistling of the wind suddenly sounded. Several figures were flying over from afar, and they were the elder in charge of the Hall of Propriety, Elder Hu Qing, Fei Shi, and the entire elite division class. Catching sight of a person amid the incoming group, Hu Yiwei immediately rushed forward to a young man's side and clasped his fist. Young master. Elder Hu. I thought that you'd left the Sanctum of Sages. Feng Zi was slightly surprised to see the other party here. I still had some other matters to attend to. Have you heard that the old master has taken in a new direct disciple named Zhongxian? Hu Yiwei asked. You are talking about Senior Zhong? Feng Zi nodded. I have heard of the matter. Senior Zhong is a man of great capability. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, he's probably the one who is behind this lightning tribulation. As much as Feng Zi hated to admit it, deep down, he knew that Zhong Xian was indeed stronger than him. Senior. Hu Yiwei's lips twitched. That meant that what the fatty had said was true. His young master had really fallen to the position of a junior. But isn't that fellow being way too negligent? He knew that those elders were going to achieve a breakthrough, so how could he still make all of them gather in the same location? How in the world does he plan to deal with such a huge lightning tribulation? Hu Yiwei harumphed angrily. The more he thought about the matter, the more unreasonable he felt that Zhong Xian fellow was. Had it been just a moment ago, he might still have been able to forcefully dissipate the lightning tribulation with his cultivation. However, with the Netherworld Azure Dragon Beast and Divine Healer by Yu messing around with the storm clouds, that small hint of a possibility had been completely extinguished. Even if he succeeded by some stroke of luck, he would be severely injured to the point where he could potentially be crippled for life. He was not a master teacher, and he did not possess any compassion for the masses or that sort of value. Naturally, there was no way he was going to sacrifice himself for others. Negligent. Senior Zhong isn't being negligent here. He's intentionally strengthening the lightning tribulation. Feng Zi replied with a hint of admiration in his eyes. Back at the Hall of Propriety, he had nearly fainted from fear after seeing how huge Elder Liao's lightning tribulation had become, too. However, after witnessing how it was so easily resolved, the fear of lightning tribulations had completely disappeared from his mind. His intentionally strengthening the lightning tribulation? Hu Yiwei widened his eyes in incomprehension upon hearing those words. He could not understand what his young master was getting at. It might sound ridiculous to you, but Senior Zhong is capable of devouring lightning tribulations. Only when the lightning tribulation is large enough for him will he be able to have his fill, Feng Zi explained calmly. Devouring lightning tribulations? Zhong Shi and the others overheard Feng Zi's words, and they nearly lost their balance and plummeted from the sky. A lightning tribulation was a form of punishment from heavens. Standing against it was no different from standing against the heavens. Could such a thing really be eaten? You must be pulling our legs. Seeing the looks of disbelief amongst the crowd, Elder Hu Qing spoke up. Feng Zi isn't joking. Zhong Shi really wields such a capability. I also saw it with my own eyes, too, Fei Shi added. Even though the lightning tribulation back at the Hall of Propriety wasn't as large as the one before us, it was still immensely powerful. Nevertheless, Zhong Shi was able to devour it with ease, and more importantly, he even scared the lightning tribulation off. Scared the lightning tribulation off? Is it even possible for a lightning tribulation to be scared? The consecutive shocks that had been dealt to their minds left the crowd in a state of utter stupefaction. The more they listened to the account of events from the group of eyewitnesses, the more they felt like they were listening to those exaggerated heroic tales that were spoken of in taverns. Rationally speaking, such a thing could not possibly be true, could it? But it did not make sense for so many esteemed figures to lie about such a matter. After a brief moment of silence, Zhong Shi stepped forward and said, "Where is Zhong Shi at the moment? Bring us to him." After all that had been said, they still had not met that legendary freshman. Just what kind of person could that man who was already on everyone's lips barely a month after enrollment possibly be? He's currently with those elders who are facing their cultivation ordeal, Feng Zi said as he pointed in a direction. Everyone quickly turned their gazes over and saw a young man sitting cross-legged in front of several elders. His lips were opening and closing non-stop, seemingly lecturing the elders before him. On the other hand, the managerial elders of the Physician Guild seemed to be almost intoxicated on the young man's lecturing. They were releasing their strength non-stop, as if fearing that their lightning tribulation would not be strong enough. "His Zhong Shi?" Zhong Shi asked with a hint of admiration in his voice. Honestly, considering how the entire sky was crackling fearfully with lightning, and given the fearsome flashes of light every now and then, it was truly incredible how the young man was still able to continue conducting a lecture so composedly. Even Hu Yiwei could not help but nod in awe. Over the years, The only person that he knew who had the mental fortitude to remain calm even in the face of a cataclysm was his master. It was no wonder that Zhongxian fellow had been able to win the young master's admiration. Just this deed alone was one that no ordinary man would be capable of pulling off. At the very least, he knew that he would not have been able to do the same. Look, look. Zhongshe is going to devour the lightning tribulation. Just as everyone was in a state of complete shock, the young man suddenly halted his lecture and stood up. With a light leap, he swiftly rose to an altitude just beneath the disquieting storm clouds. From the position the young man was in, there was no doubt that he would catch the attention of the lightning tribulation and come under its attack. He will be zapped to death like that. Zhongshe could not help but exclaim in trepidation. There's no need to worry about that. I saw this sight earlier, and I can tell you for certain that Zhongshe will dash into the midst of the storm clouds next. Before long, the storm clouds will swiftly contract and... Seeing that Zhongxian had gone into motion, Zhongyu turned to the crowd and began explaining confidently. But the next moment, a bizarre expression surfaced on everyone's faces. Perplexed by the odd response, Zhongyu quickly turned his head toward the sky, and the sight that he saw made him freeze on the spot. This. Before the young man in the sky could make a move, a powerful bolt of lightning had already zapped down on him. Catcher. The lightning bolt roasted the young man well, and a fragrant smell wafted through the area. All that might have been lacking at that moment was a pinch of cumin. Is this what you all mean by devouring the lightning tribulation? Zhongshe and the others looked at those who had been full of compliments for Zhongxian earlier, speechless. Chapter 1403 Hu Yiwei's dub. Before the lightning bolt fell, they were almost convinced by the others that Zhongxian was a living deity and that there was nothing in this world that he was incapable of. After all, even lightning tribulations were frightened of him. But the sight before them was clearly telling them that they had been deceived. Was the young man not supposed to dive right into the storm clouds and make the lightning tribulation tremble in fear? So, why would he end up being struck by lightning instead? From the looks of it, it seemed like he had no strength to go against the lightning tribulation at all. Maybe, he might still be in a period of adaptation. He should get better in a moment. Zhongyu proposed meekly. Even though the situation had gone completely differently to what he had expected, he still had deep trust in Zhongxian's capability. After all, what he had witnessed earlier was completely beyond reason. But once more, before he could finish his words, Zhongxian was struck by another bolt of lightning. This time, the sheer might of the lightning was so great that it crushed him right back down to the ground, and his body convulsed uncontrollably as the lightning coursed through him. Boom! Boom! More and more lightning bolts zapped down on Zhongxian, and his convulsions grew more and more intense. Elder Ge could not help but ask, should we leap in to save him? Even he could not stand looking at the situation any longer. After all the praise that everyone had heaped on the young man, the latter turned out to be an utter disappointment. How do you want to save him? Zhongshe asked with a bitter smile. The lightning tribulation was already extremely powerful as it was, and their interference would only cause it to grow even stronger. They would only be worsening the situation if they leapt in recklessly. Then, are we to look as that lad gets electrocuted to death? Elder Ge asked with a frown. I don't know either. Zhongshe shook his head with a conflicted look on his face. It was his duty to protect the students of the Sanctum of Sages as the deputy sanctum head, but this was the first time he had encountered such a powerful lightning tribulation. He had no idea how he could possibly stand against it. While the crowd was looking on the situation helplessly, the one who was being ravaged by the violent lightning bolts, Zhongxian, was busy urging Vicious telepathically, "Are you done finding it yet? Hurry up." It was not that he did not want to dash right into the storm clouds to absorb the lightning energy, but it had not been easy for him to create such a massive congregation of storm clouds, and it was unlikely that he would be allowed to do so once more. Naturally, he had to make full use of this opportunity for Vicious to locate his upper body. It was hard to tell when the lightning tribulation would flee once he started absorbing its energy, so Zhongxian had no choice but to allow the lightning tribulation to strike him. It was fortunate that his physical body and primordial spirit had been tempered by lightning on many occasions, thus granting him an exceptional resistance against lightning. Even with the storm clouds relentlessly sending bolts of lightning his way, it would still be a while before his life was truly at risk. "Master, I can sense my body distinctly, it's definitely here. But for some reason, I can't zone in on its exact location. It's almost as if it's hidden within some folded space," Vicious replied in distress. He was also feeling rather anxious, seeing his master being zapped by lightning in order to buy some time for him to locate his upper body, but despite searching far and wide, he was simply unable to locate it. He was certain that his body was there, but for him to be unable to zone in on its location, most likely, it was located in a different dimension from that of the Sanctum of Sages. Folded space. Zhong Xian contemplated for a moment before his heart suddenly skipped a beat. "I recall hearing that the inner sanctum is located in a folded space. Could it be that your upper body is located there?" Zhong Xian had never fully explored the massive Sanctum of Sages, but he did get an overview of it from the sky. One thing that he had found rather peculiar was that he could not find any traces of the inner sanctum, and after asking around, he learned that it was actually located in a folded space. This was somewhat similar to the ancient domain that ancient sage Qiu Wu had left behind. Vicious could clearly sense the presence of his body but was unable to find it. This would mean that there was a chance that it was hidden within a folded space, which would hinder Vicious from accurately pinpointing its location. "There is such a possibility," Vicious replied. "All right. I'll absorb the lightning tribulation now, and we'll continue our search once I get to the inner sanctum." Knowing that he might really be electrocuted to death if he allowed the lightning tribulation to continue striking him, Zhong Xian pushed himself up from the depression he was in and dashed up into the sky, heading right toward the congregation of storm clouds. Earlier, he had headed to the Physician Guild at Divine Healer by Yu's invitation in order to conduct a lecture concerning poison. However, when he saw that those attending the lectures were all Saint Seven Dan Pinnacle cultivators who were just a step away from achieving a breakthrough, he could not resist making use of the opportunity to help them achieve a breakthrough. He did not possess any manuals concerning the breakthrough from Saint 7 Dan to Saint 8 Dan, but through pointing out and resolving the main flaws in their cultivation, along with some assistance from the vine, it was not too difficult for him to help all of them to achieve a breakthrough. All of that eventually culminated into the scene that nearly left Elder Ge fainting from shock earlier. As expected of a lightning tribulation formed by more than a dozen cultivators undergoing their dimension-sundering ordeal simultaneously, the energy that it harnessed was indeed incredible. By diving right into the storm clouds and devouring the surrounding lightning energy furiously, it did not take him too long to fill the loop within his dantian. At the same time, he managed to raise his cultivation to the point where he was just a step away from making a breakthrough. Very soon, the lightning tribulation came to realize that someone was stealing its energy and quickly fled in fright. "I managed to reach half-grand Dominion realm," Zhong Xian thought. Even though the lightning tribulation had fled very quickly, Zhong Xian had still managed to make the final step forward and shatter his bottleneck, reaching half-grand Dominion realm. From the looks of it, it was about time for him to really start looking for Grand Dominion realm cultivation techniques so that he could push for higher realms. After entering the lightning tribulation, Zhong Xian quickly changed his clothes and tidied himself, such that when the lightning tribulation left, he was no longer in the unkempt state that he had been in before when he descended from the sky. It was only then that he noticed that the crowd below were all dumbstruck. To his surprise, Sun Qiong was among the crowd, too. "Young master." Seeing that Zhong Xian was fine, remaining as awe-inspiring as he usually was, Sun Qiong heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly rushed forward, and with a flick of his hand, he took out a jade container and handed it over. "These are the pinnacle spirit stones that Elder Ge has prepared in order to compensate you." Compensation? Pinnacle spirit stones? Zhong Xian was stunned. It had taken him so much effort just to earn 1 pinnacle spirit stones. While thinking of this, he suddenly recalled that Zhong Chun still owed him 5, whereas a butler who had not even reached the Saint realm yet actually managed to find 5 so easily. But the terms that Sun Qiong used, compensation, why would an elder feel compelled to compensate him? "You are Yang Shi's direct disciple?" Just as Zhongxian was going to clarify the matter, a doubtful voice suddenly sounded. Zhongxian turned his head and saw an old man walking up to him with a deep frown on his forehead. His Fengzi's butler, Yangshi's subordinate. Noting the hint of confusion in Zhongxian's eyes, Sun Qiong stepped forward and introduced the man with a smile. "He's currently under my command." Yangshi's subordinate. "Under your command?" Zhongxian felt his head spinning wildly upon hearing those words. The Yangshi that had been coming from his mouth was a fake. It was already a huge blessing that he had been able to convince Fengzi to trust him, but why would Yangshi's subordinate be here too, and not to mention, be under Sun Qiong's command? Knowing that his butler was not a reliable person, Zhongxian turned to the old man and asked, "You are?" "I am Hu Yiwei, Yangshi's butler." Hu Yiwei introduced himself before assessing the young man before him intently. A moment later, he could not help but pose the doubt in his heart. "Zhongshi, pardon me for asking, but are you from the Zhong clan?" "I'm not." Zhongxian shook his head helplessly. "You aren't?" Hu Yiwei seemed to be a little surprised by the answer. "Zhongshi, if it's not too much for me to ask, could I take a look at your hand? There's a thought I have in mind that I would like to verify." "You want to borrow my hand?" Zhongxian was bewildered by Hu Yiwei's bizarre actions, but after a slight pause, he still extended his hand. The old man placed his fingers on his pulse lightly, seemingly trying to scan his vitals for certain signs. As time went by, the frown on the old man's forehead grew deeper and deeper. "This is weird. Are you really not from the Zhong clan? Are you referring to my bloodline?" "I am really not from the Zhong clan, so I don't have the bloodline of the Zhong clan either," Zhongxian explained as he retracted his hand. Previously, he had already borrowed Zhong Jiuxiao's blood essence to check this matter, and from the fact that there was no resonance between their bloodlines, it was clear that he was not an offspring of the Zhong clan. Then, has Zhong clan been afflicted with? Hu Yiwei was just about to ask something when his words abruptly halted. A moment later, he shook his head and said, "Never mind, it's not an important issue. I still have things to attend to, so I'll take my leave for now." After saying those words, Hu Yiwei turned around, and with a slight flicker of his silhouette, he vanished from the spot. Chapter 1404 Tower of Master Teachers. His words sure were incoherent, Zhongxian remarked internally with a shake of his head. He had thought that Hu Yiwei, as Yangshi's butler, would surely be an imposing and formidable figure, but who would have thought that he was such an unreliable figure? But speaking of which, it was a little coincidental that the innate fetal poison suddenly worked up just as Hu Yiwei placed his fingers on his pulse earlier. It was fortunate that he managed to suppress the innate fetal poison from thrashing around via his Heaven's Path Shenqi and the lightning energy that he had absorbed earlier, or else it truly would have been awkward if he was labeled a poison master as a result of that. In any case, since Hu Yiwei had already left at a speed even faster than Luo Xuanqing's, Zhongxian could not be bothered to dawdle any longer on his affairs anymore. Thus, he turned his gaze to Sun Qiong and asked telepathically, "You said that these pinnacle spirit stones are Elder Ji's compensation. What happened?" "It's like this." Sun Qiong quickly filled Zhongxian in on what had happened earlier. "Why you gave away your identity, and even cleared the assessment of the teacher acknowledgement hall?" Zhongxian nearly keeled over after hearing the entire account of events. This butler of his sure was courageous. Despite being a fake, he actually brazenly pointed his finger at the real one and accused the latter of being a fake instead. He really should have been counting his blessing that he was still alive. "I'll let this matter slide, but you'll really have to rein yourself in more in the future. As you know, my teacher is a low-profile person and likes his peace, so it wouldn't do for his butler to be so high-profile." Understood. This had to be the reason the predecessors warned individuals against lying. Whether one liked it or not, it would always spiral out of control in one way or another. While he was deeply frustrated by Sun Qiong's actions, to be fair, the latter was only working within the web of lies that he had crafted, so it was not fair to pin the blame entirely on him. With all that had been said and done, it was already impossible for him to back out of this matter. All he could do at this point was quickly meet the requirements for unsealing the Sanctum Head token before Yangshe found out about his existence. "Zhongshe, Regarding the lightning tribulation earlier, Zhonshe walked over and began speaking. To be honest, he was still a little overwhelmed by what he had seen earlier. Considering the sheer scale of the lightning tribulation, it would not have been surprising if it had torn down the Hall of Integrity, but who could have known that the fellow would actually scare it away? It's a technique that my teacher has imparted to me. It allows me to curb the might of a lightning tribulation, but at the same time, it deals grievous wounds to me. It'll take me quite some time to recover from the wounds that I have sustained this time around, Zhongxian explained. At the same time, his face abruptly turned pale, and his body wobbled on the spot, seemingly ready to fall at any moment. The keen-eyed Sun Qiong immediately caught the signal and rushed forward to support him. It's a technique that our teacher imparted to you? Why didn't he impart it to me too? By the side, Feng Zi brooded unhappily over the unfair treatment between him and his senior. He nearly died from the overwhelming might of a lightning tribulation back when he was facing his leaving aperture ordeal. Yet, it turned out that his teacher actually possessed a technique to curb the might of a lightning tribulation, and his teacher had only taught it to his senior. That would not do. He really needed to get in contact with his teacher soon to inquire about this matter. Otherwise, he would just have to ask his senior to teach him. They were from the same lineage anyway, so if his senior could grasp it, he would surely be able to do so, too. Hearing those words, Zhonshe felt so stifled that his cheeks began twitching uncontrollably. Sanctum Head Zhon, this might not be the best occasion to ask about this matter, but I wish to enter the inner sanctum. May I know what conditions are required for that? Knowing that the other party could tell that he was faking weakness, Zhongxian decisively changed the topic. Through Sun Qiong's introduction, he had come to learn that Zhonshe was the incumbent deputy sanctum head, so he made sure to put on a respectful attitude. Even though he was the only candidate in line for the sanctum head position, he was still lacking in strength and capability to inherit the position, so it would not be convenient for him to flaunt his identity yet. Thus, he could only assume the identity as an ordinary student before the other party for the time being. You wish to enter the inner sanctum? Not expecting to hear such a question, Zhonshe pondered for a moment before replying. There are two conditions that you have to meet in order to enter the inner sanctum. Firstly, your age must not be over 40, and secondly, you have to achieve proficiency of 8-star in your primary occupation. Zhongshe is registered at our Sanctum of Sages as a master teacher, so in order to enter the inner sanctum, you have to clear your 8-star master teacher examination. Hearing those words, Zhongxian nodded. Judging from Zhonshe's words, primary occupation clearly referred to one's main occupation, which was likely determined by which avenue one had enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages from. Bai Hongyin, for example, should have been nominated by the Demonic Tunist Guild, so she would have to achieve 8-star proficiency as a demonic tunist in order to enter the inner sanctum. As Zhongxian had been nominated by the Master Teacher Pavilion, so his primary occupation was Master Teacher. In other words, having just his supporting occupation reach the proficiency of 8-star would not be sufficient. He would have to become an 8-star Master Teacher in order to be qualified to enter the inner sanctum. In order to take the 8-star Master Teacher examination, I will require 8 8-star supporting occupations. Currently, the only 8-star occupations that I have are Spirit Awakener, Physician, and Formation Master. As for Beast Tamer and Demonic Tunist, I should be able to acquire their emblems pretty easily as well, but even with that, I will still be lacking 3 supporting occupation. Zhongxian swiftly made a mental calculation and sighed. He turned to Zhonshe and asked, Sanctum Head Zhon, I am still lacking a couple of supporting occupations to clear the 8-star Master Teacher examination. May I know if there's a more efficient way for me to clear the examinations as quick as possible? At the current rate the news was spreading, not to mention that even Hu Yiwei was alerted of the matter, most likely, it would not take long for the Real Yangshe to catch wind of the news. And if he was not even an 8-star Master Teacher by the time Yangshe arrived, he would be in very deep trouble. Well, considering his own talent, he was rather confident that even the real Yangshe would be more than glad to have him as his direct disciple, so the matter might not really as bad as he feared, but that would only be his final resort. After all, it would be unwise to leave one's fate to chance. Furthermore, Luo Ruoxin had been punished by her own clan for revealing her reluctance to marry the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, so he had to quickly gain sufficient strength in order to save her. As such, it was of the utmost importance for him to find vicious upper body so that he would at least have a powerful trump card to play should the situation truly turn awry. Most importantly of all, there was a chance that he might be able to meet Luo Ruoxin if he entered the inner sanctum. You want to clear the examinations as quickly as possible. Zhonshu frowned upon hearing those words. Due to the unique nature of the master-teacher occupation, one must first meet a certain prerequisite in one's supporting occupations before one is allowed to take the promotion examination. Under normal circumstances, you would have to go around it systematically, clearing each of the supporting occupations individually before challenging the 8-star master-teacher examination. However, the Sanctum of Sages happens to have a more efficient system to go around that, and that is, challenging the Tower of Master Teachers. The Tower of Master Teachers? Zhong Xian asked. Despite having read plenty of books in the Sanctum of Sages, he had never heard of the Tower of Master Teachers before. In essence, the Tower of Master Teachers is a trial. There are 9 floors to it in total, the first 8 of which are for the various supporting occupations you have studied before. Each of floor is guarded by the inceptive sage of the occupation, and as long as you can earn the other party's recognition, you will have cleared the floor, and the passageway to the next floor will open up. As for the 9th floor, it will be guarded by a young 8-star master teacher of the Sanctum of Sages. If you are able to clear his trial too, you will be granted the 8-star master teacher emblem, Zhonshu explained. However, I can tell you that the trial that you will face on every single floor will be of unimaginable difficulty. After all, the inceptive sages are representatives of the best of the younger generation in an occupation, so winning their recognition and getting past them won't be an easy feat. In fact, in the several dozen millenniums since the founding to the Sanctum of Sages, there have only been 3 people who have cleared the Tower of Master Teachers. 3 people? Zhong Xian was taken aback. To be able to receive the recognition of 8 inceptive sages was, without a doubt, an incredibly arduous task. It was rather surprising to hear that there were a handful of people who had cleared this trial before. That's right. The first one to clear the Tower of Master Teachers was our 7th Sanctum head. Back then, he was still in his early 30s when he challenged it, and it took him 3 days to clear the entire tower and successfully become an 8-star master teacher. That incident eventually became a legend that students still speak of in admiration. The second one was the current head of the Zhong clan, Sword Saint Xingmeng. Like our 7th Sanctum head, he took just 3 days to clear the Tower of Master Teachers, and he was only in his early 30s, too. As for the last one, at this point, Zhonshu could not help but shake his head bitterly before continuing. Her record is far more frightening than her 2 predecessors. Frightening? Yes. In just 4 hours, she managed to dash up from the 1st floor to the 9th by forcing all of the inceptive sages to submit to her. Even though the incident had happened a few years ago, astonishment and wonderment still flickered across Zhonshu's eyes as he recalled the event. More importantly, when that person cleared the Tower of Master Teachers, she was only 17 years old. 17 years old? Zhong Xian was astonished. A 17-year-old 8-star master teacher? Could it be? He was already in his 20s, but he still was not an 8-star master teacher. On the other hand, the other party had already been an 8-star master teacher when she was 17 years old. At this moment, a figure could not help but float into his mind. You should have heard of her as well. Zhonshu chuckled. She's none other than the little princess of the Luo clan. Chapter 1405 Kill him, it's indeed Ruoxin. Zhong Xian exclaimed inwardly. Who else other than his girlfriend could have the ability to create a record that even Zhonshu was still shocked by and become an 8-star master teacher at 17 years old? However, as proud of Luo Ruoxin as he was, this matter also increased the pressure on him. His girlfriend had already been an 8-star master teacher for a couple of years, but he was only taking the examination now. It seemed like he was really lagging behind. He would have to work much harder to make up for it. Seeing that Zhong Xian had fallen into contemplation after hearing of the various records concerning the Tower of Master Teacher, Zhongshe could not help but ask, "Does Zhongshe want to challenge the Tower of Master Teacher, too?" "I do intend to." Zhongxian nodded. "But before that, I would like to browse through some books first so as to refresh my knowledge and prepare myself for the trial." Not expecting Zhongxian to raise such a simple request, Zhongshe replied with a smile. "You wish to browse through some books? What books do you want to browse through?" Putting aside the fact that the young man before him was Yangshi's direct disciple, just his ability to neutralize the lightning tribulation made him a person worth befriending. Be it his friends or family, there were bound to be important people in his life who would have to face cultivation ordeals in the future. If he could just engage the help of this young man, he would be able to guarantee their safety, and there was nothing more valuable than that. Knowing that Zhongshe was trying to express his goodwill toward him, Zhongxian requested, "Apothecary, painter, celestial designer, terpsichore, beast tamer, and appraiser. If it isn't too much trouble, I would like to visit the respective libraries of these occupations." He did not like to be indebted to others, but he could not afford to waste time anymore. "Oh, you wish to look through the books concerning your supporting occupations?" Zhongshe was slightly surprised for a moment before nodding. He had expected Zhongxian to request for permission to access part of the confidential book collection in the Sanctum of Sages. "That isn't a problem. If you simply wish to access the books of those supporting occupations, I can lend you my token for a while. This way, even if you haven't achieved an 8-star proficiency in those supporting occupations, you'll still be able to access the 8-star books. However, there will be a time limit on how long you can access those books for. For each supporting occupation, you will only have half a day, and I fear that even I cannot grant you any more time than that." Even as the deputy sanctum head, Zhongshe's authority in the Sanctum of Sages was still rather limited. It was already the limit of his authority to grant Zhongxian half a day of unrestricted access in each of the supporting occupations' libraries. Half a day. That's more than enough. Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. To others, half a day was only barely enough to grant one an extremely rough overview of the entire occupation, but to him, that was plenty of time. With so much time, he would definitely be able to transfer all of the books within a library into the Library of Heaven's Path. That's a relief. "All right, here is my token." With a smile, Zhongshe passed his token over. "Thank you, Sanctum Head Zhong." Zhongxian clasped his fist and uttered his words of gratitude. Due to Zhongshe's help, he would be able to master the various supporting occupations in the shortest time possible and push for a breakthrough to 8-star Master Teacher. "If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave." With the token in his possession, Zhongxian hurriedly headed in the direction of the Hall of Erudition. The first place he headed to after reaching the Hall of Erudition was the Apothecary Guild. The token that Zhongshe had provided him truly worked wonders. It did not take too long for him to successfully access the library. 4 hours later, he was done browsing through all of the 8-star books. After spending roughly 2 hours more reinforcing his knowledge, he stood up and set forth for the Painter Guild. Just like that, Zhongxian spent an entire day traveling between the various guilds. He would only spend a maximum of 6 hours in each guild, and just like that, in little more than a day, he managed to raise his proficiency in all of his supporting occupations, with the exception of Poison Master and Soul Oracle, to 8-star. While Zhongxian was busy mastering his supporting occupations, Luo Xianqing was finally done reinforcing his cultivation. In the depths of his eyes, one could vaguely see the intricacies of space twinkling brightly, reminiscent of a starry sky. As a member of the Luo clan, his comprehension of spatial laws was far deeper and more profound than that of other Saint 8-dan dimension sundering realm cultivators. He closed his eyes slowly and focused his senses on perceiving the spatial energy coursing through his body. Some time later, a deep frown suddenly formed between his eyebrows, and he turned in a certain direction and roared, "Who is it?" The space where his gaze fell was completely empty. There was not a single person to be seen. Even when scanning the area with one's spiritual perception, there was nothing to be found. But the next moment, bizarre folds began rippling from that empty space, and an elder slowly materialized. It seems like the young master's bloodline has been completely awakened upon reaching the dimension-sundering realm. Congratulations! The elder clasped his fist while giving his congratulations. Upon getting a closer sight of the elder's figure, Luo Xianqing heaved a sigh of relief before asking, "Elder Qi, what are you doing here?" "The first elder wishes to meet you," Elder Qi reported. "First elder?" Luo Xianqing subconsciously clenched his fists tightly as he asked, "Where's my younger sister?" "Young master, you can rest assured that the little princess is doing perfectly fine. It's just that she is under temporary confinement and is unable to communicate with the outside world at the moment. However, you can be certain that she isn't injured at all. Besides, given her strength, not even the first elder would be able to hurt her," Elder Qi replied. "Humph, that had better be the case." Luo Xianqing harumphed coldly as the apprehension he felt within alleviated slightly. In terms of cultivation, his younger sister was far from the very peak of the master-teacher continent, but when equipped with the Dimension Silencer, it was doubtful if even Zhongxian's teacher, Yang Xian, would be a match for her. Naturally, the first elder of the Luo clan stood even less of a chance. Knowing that his younger sister was safe, Luo Xianqing turned to Elder Qi and instructed, "Bring me to the first elder." With a nod of his head, Elder Qi flicked his hand lightly. Tz La. A unique energy began shrouding the space between the both of them, isolating them from the rest of the world. Following which, Elder Qi tapped his finger forward, and a light barrier appeared right before them. A ripple diffused across the light barrier, and the silhouette of an elder gradually grew more and more clear. It was the golden-robed elder who had witnessed Zhongxian standing against the lightning tribulation back then. "Not bad, not bad." Upon seeing Luo Xianqing, the first elder nodded in approval. "Your improvement is faster than I anticipated." "First elder." Luo Xianqing spoke up anxiously, but before he could finish his words, the other party interjected. "All right, I know what you are going to ask, but now isn't the time. I have 2 missions for you that you will have to accomplish as soon as possible." The first elder looked at Luo Xianqing with such intent eyes that it almost seemed as if he would materialize through the light barrier and arrive right before them. "First elder, feel free to ask anything of me." Luo Xianqing took a deep breath before clasping his fist. As an offspring of the Luo clan, he was indebted to the Luo clan for grooming him. Naturally, he was duty-bound to accomplish the missions that the Luo clan assigned to him. "Firstly, I want you to get on close terms with that young man who had helped you pass your cultivation ordeal," the first elder instructed. "The young man who had helped me tide across my cultivation ordeal? Are you referring to Zhongxian?" "I can do that." Luo Xianqing nodded. After everything Zhongxian had done for him, he already considered him a friend. Even without the first elder's instruction, he definitely would have gotten on close terms with him. Secondly, in the Qingyuan Empire, there's a place known as the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. I want you to head there to conduct an investigation as soon as you get time. Based on what we have found, your younger sister went under a pseudonym during the period she was gone. At this point, a sharp glint flashed through the first elder's eyes as he continued. "If my intuition is right, the person she likes is there as well. I want you to root that man out and kill him silently." "You want me to kill him?" Luo Xuanqing's body froze upon hearing those words. He hurriedly lifted his gaze and anxiously said, "But my younger sister has feelings for him. She will be devastated if we kill him." He knew his younger sister's temperament very well. She was an extremely obstinate person, and once she had decided upon something, she would never change her mind even till death. If that man whom his younger sister loved were to die, she would definitely go berserk. There's nothing that time cannot heal. I have seen plenty of cultivators who thought that their feelings for one another would last an eternity, but time makes everything fade. She'll eventually get over it. Furthermore, even if she doesn't understand, you should know how important the engagement with the Zhong clan is. The first elder paused for a brief moment before continuing. The Zhong clan was enraged to hear of the matter, and we anticipate that they will attempt to bring the marriage ceremony forward. There's a good chance that the ceremony will be held before the end of the year, so we need to make sure to kill that man before then to sever any thought of her getting together with him. Otherwise, neither you nor I will be able to shoulder the consequences. Even if your younger sister manages to get together with that man, she will still have to pay the price for her actions and live an entire life of misery. I trust that you don't wish to see your younger sister becoming an outcast of the Luo clan and a sinner to all mankind. Luo Shenqing clenched his fists tightly. Chapter 1406 Challenging the Tower of Master Teachers. Luo Shenqing resented the idea of his younger sister becoming a sacrificial pawn in a political marriage with the Zhong clan, but at the same time, he understood how important it was for this marriage to go through. Anyone who attempted to halt this marriage would be as good as the sinner of humanity. If there was any other alternative, there was no way he would allow such a fate to befall his younger sister. Luo Shenqing was silent for a moment before saying, I have already promised my younger sister not to investigate that man's affairs, and I have no intention of breaking my promise to her. However, rest assured that I'll get someone to look into it and make a move against that man in my stead. You'll get someone to do it in your place. Who is it? You should know how important it is to keep this matter confidential, or else we will be in deep trouble, the first elder said with a frown. If it was found that the Luo clan had attempted to kill the man whom the little princess loved, the Luo clan would surely be condemned for its actions. Thus, it was imperative that they found someone trustworthy to carry out the job. The person I'll be entrusting this matter to is a close brother of mine, so there's no need to worry about him turning against us. Luo Shenqing replied. He's none other than the person whom you told me to get close to earlier, Zhong Xian. Him. The first elder was startled for a moment before he nodded slowly. It's indeed admirable how he dived fearlessly into the storm clouds in order to save you. Such relationships are hard to come by, so treasure it well. However, you must make sure that the brother of yours doesn't give anything away, or else the little princess's rage will be hard for any of us to withstand. Don't worry. Luo Shenqing nodded. My brother, Zhong Xian, has no ties with my younger sister at all. The both of them don't even know one another, so there's no way on earth he would possibly leak the information to her. That would be for the best. This matter is of grave importance, so make sure to handle it promptly. I'll be waiting for your report. Following which, the light barrier began flickering. Who? The first elder disappeared from both of their views. Luo Shenqing closed his eyes as unnerving tranquility floated in the air, reminiscent of the calm before a storm. Slowly, his body began to tremble uncontrollably, and a quivering voice came from his lips. Elder Qi, there are so many experts in the clan, why is he entrusting this mission to me? If his younger sister ever learned that he had sent someone to kill the person she loved, that would probably spell the end of their kinship. They would never be able to return to the good old days. Sigh. Knowing what Luo Shenqing was thinking, Elder Qi shook his head and said, I know that it's hard on you, but the first elder has his considerations for making such a choice, too. Considerations? Are my feelings part of his considerations? Or am I nothing more than a mere tool to the Luo clan? Luo Shenqing's voice was suppressed, but the deep emotions behind his words seemed to be on the verge of bursting forth. Elder Qi shook his head for a moment before quietly replying, She's your younger sister. If you are the one to make the move, she will only consider it a personal conflict between the both of you. The rest of us can feign ignorance, and there will still be some ground for reconciliation between her and the rest of the clan. However, if she learns that that man was killed by the experts of our clan, this matter will be blown out of proportion. She will become completely estranged from our Luo clan. As one of the core members of our Luo clan, you should be able to understand this logic. Jeji. The sound of Luo Shenqing clenching his fists was not loud, but it echoed conspicuously amid the still air. As a core member of the Luo clan, how could he possibly be unaware of all this? As a doting brother, this was not the first time that he had made a move against those foolish men who dared approach his younger sister. That's why, if he made a move against that man, he would be able to take the full blame for doing so. The Luo clan would not be implicated, and its reputation would not be besmirched. Also, you should know what happened to the 5 elder brothers that came before you. Our Luo clan owes you. Treat this as a trial. As long as you can accomplish what's asked of you, no one will dare speak another word when you rise to the position of the clan head in the future. Otherwise, there's no saying that dissidents will not start to act up. Elder Qi continued. Enough. Hearing about his 5 elder brothers, Luo Xuanqing's eyes could not help but redden slightly. A heavy silence drifted in the air for a while before it was broken by a sigh from Elder Qi. Even if not for anyone else, you should think in their stead as well. I believe you know better than me what the right decision to make is. Once again, there was a long moment of silence before Luo Xuanqing finally muttered, I'll do it. That would be for the best. Don't drag it out for too long. It will only prolong your misery. And make sure that no one else hears of the matter, Elder Qi said with a wave of his hand. Following which, his silhouette suddenly faded before vanishing from the spot. With his departure, the sealed space around them broke open, and the callings of the cicadas and beasts around him immediately gushed in. Who? However, Luo Xuanqing remained completely motionless on the spot, seemingly deep in thought. A long time later, all of his emotions eventually converged into a long sigh. Younger sister, I'm sorry. Luo Xuanqing hated the notion of putting his younger sister through an arranged marriage, but admittedly, only the young prodigy of the Zhong clan was worthy of her. On the other hand, the person she liked was a nobody from a Tier 1 empire. Before behemoths like the Zhong clan and the Luo clan, that man was nothing at all. Even if I don't make a move, the Zhong clan will make a move, too. And once they do so, things could very well spiral out of control. Luo Xuanqing shook his head. There was no way he could miss that implied meaning behind the first elder's words. The young prodigy of the Zhong clan was as important to the Zhong clan as his younger sister was to the Luo clan. For the young prodigy's fiancé to be stolen by another man was, no doubt, a slap to the Zhong clan's face. There was no way they would let that man get away scot-free. If the Luo clan were to make a move first, at least the Zhong clan's rage would be placated, and his younger sister would not be snubbed after marrying over. Even though the Luo clan and the Zhong clan were both top sage clans whose names were echoed in unison, those who were in the upper society of the master-teacher continent were all deeply aware that the Zhong clan commanded far greater influence and power than the Luo clan. I guess there's no choice but for me to play the villain. Luo Xuanqing shook his head. I'll have to entrust this mission to someone reliable. After regaining composure, a glint flashed across Luo Xuanqing's eyes. Given that Zhong Xian already knew bits and pieces of this matter, there was no one more suited than him to carry this task out. It was just that, this mission could be as good as throwing the other party into the abyss. Once his younger sister learned of the matter, there was no way she would let the other party go. But in return, he would fully acknowledge the other party and protect him for life. As he rose in standing, he would make sure to compensate the other party for that. This could both be an opportunity or a crisis for the other party. Dashing straight ahead, it did not take long for him to arrive at Zhong Xian's residence. After realizing that the latter had headed out, he quickly asked around for his whereabouts before heading off to the Hall of Erudition. Zhongshe isn't around anymore. He's headed off to the Tower of Master Teachers. Tower of Master Teachers? Is he planning to clear his 8-star Master Teacher examination? Luo Xuanqing was surprised to hear that. As his younger sister had challenged the Tower of Master Teachers in her time as well, it went without saying that he was aware of this trial in the Sanctum of Sages. However, he did not think that Zhong Xian would want to challenge it too. Due to the massive uproar that happened as a result of the terrifyingly large lightning tribulation at the Hall of Integrity, it was no longer a secret that the culprit behind the incident, Zhong Xian, was planning on challenging the Tower of Master Teachers. Rather, it had already become public knowledge. It won't be easy to clear the Tower of Master Teachers. That fellow sure is daring. Luo Xuanqing remarked with a shake of his head before rushing in the direction of the Tower of Master Teachers. The Tower of Master Teachers was indeed the most efficient way for one to be promoted to an 8-star Master Teacher, but if it was easy to clear, there would not only be a handful of successful challengers in the several dozen millenniums since the founding of the Sanctum of Sages. In fact, he had thought about challenging the Tower of Master Teachers in the past, but eventually, he had decided against it because he knew that it would be impossible for him to accomplish with his current level of strength. That trial not only required one to possess superior fighting prowess and talent. More than that, One's comprehension of the various supporting occupations had to have achieved an extremely high mastery as well, and this was exactly what had stopped many in their footsteps. After all, not everyone was a true genius like his younger sister, capable of grasping anything in an instant. Flitting forward, it did not take long for him to arrive before the Tower of Master Teachers. By the time he arrived, a huge crowd had already gathered around the area. Even the deputy sanctum head, Zhong Tiancheng, was standing close by with eyes filled with expectations. At around this moment, someone amid the crowd shouted, "It's starting," following which, the first floor of the Tower of Master Teachers lit up. Chapter 1407 Xingyun Pup, the first floor. Luo Shenqing turned to one of the managerial elders watching the commotion by the side and asked, "What will Zhongshe be challenging in the first floor?" He knew that Zhongshen's strengths mainly lay in formations, beast taming, and spirit enchantment. As long as one of these three was the challenge for the first floor, the other party would be able to clear it with ease. Turning his head, the managerial elder's eyes immediately twitched upon seeing Luo Shenqing, and he hurriedly replied, "His challenging Celestial Designer first." Celestial Designer? So, the one guarding the floor should be Jiang Feifei? Luo Xuanqing's face paled. The inceptive sage of the Celestial Designer Hall in the Sanctum of Sages is Jiang Feifei, so Zhongshe should be facing her, the managerial elder replied nervously. "That's not good," Luo Shenqing muttered anxiously. A freshman like Zhongshen might not have heard of Jiang Feifei, but there was no one in the inner sanctum who did not know who she was. In fact, the soul-binding golden bead that he had intended to use against the Netherworld Azure Dragon beast back then had been forged by her. As one of the top 3 sage clans, the geniuses of the Jiang clan were in no way inferior to him, and Jiang Feifei's talent in the field of designing and creating artifacts was unmatched by any of her peers. The elders of the Sanctum of Sages Celestial Designer Hall were full of praise for her, and they believed that there was a good chance that she could become a 9-star celestial designer in the next few decades. Even though it might seem as if it would not make much of a difference, the sequencing of opponents in the Tower of Master Teachers mattered hugely. The challenger should always start with the easiest supporting occupation in order to boost their confidence before slowly moving on to the harder ones. But with Jiang Feifei on the very first floor, it could be said that Zhongshen was facing hell mode right from the very start. There was no hope of victory at all. It was doubtful whether his younger sister would be able to clear Jiang Feifei's trial or not, let alone Zhongshen, and to face such an opponent on the very first floor was not confidence, it was blind recklessness. In the midst of Luo Xuanqing's anxiety, he heard someone say, "Jiang Feifei has always been very strict on herself and those around her, she would never go easy on anyone. It seems like that fellow is going to be defeated right from the get-go." Turning his head over, he saw an elder standing right next to Zhongshe, stroking his beard leisurely as he looked at the Tower of Master Teachers. He was the managerial elder of the Celestial Designer Hall. Clearly, he did not think that Zhongshen stood much of a match against Jiang Feifei. Hearing those words, Luo Xuanqing's gaze slowly turned grim as he clenched his fists tightly. He could not help but sigh deeply as he thought, "I don't know why that fellow is so eager to become an 8-star master teacher, but admittedly, he does possess both capability and wits. It's just a pity that my younger sister has an engagement with the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, or else he would have been a good choice as well. It's truly a pity." Entering the first floor of the Tower of Master Teachers, Zhongshen swiftly scanned his surroundings, and soon, he caught sight of a young lady seated by the corner with a peculiar-looking artifact in her hands. Her eyes were completely focused on the artifact, and with a small knife in her other hand, she seemed to be carving the artifact. The movements of her hands were so fluid that it almost felt like she was painting a beautiful picture. Without raising her head, the young lady quietly said, "Wait there for a moment. I'll assess you after I'm done carving this." "Very well." Zhongshen nodded as he waited patiently on the spot. Even though the young lady had not looked up, it was not too hard to tell that she was likely a stunning beauty just by looking at her profile. More importantly, she was actually a Saint 7 Dan pinnacle expert, just like Zhong Chun. Despite that, she still sat unreservedly on the ground, completely absorbed into her carving. Even Zhongxian was slightly impressed by the sheer intensity of her focus. He lowered his head to take a look at the object which she was carving, and while it was still too early to tell for sure, it seemed to be a small part of a celestial designer artifact. The artifacts created by celestial designers were known for their exquisiteness. Every stroke of the knife from the young lady would cause a thin slice of metal to fall to the ground, and in just a few breaths, it had already formed a uniquely shaped spare part. It connected perfectly with a larger artifact that she had before her, such that even the crevice between the two artifacts could not even be seen. What exquisite carving skills! Zhongxian remarked in amazement. Even though he did not have much experience with the work of a celestial designer, through the description of the books, he could tell that the carving skills of the young lady before him were top-notch, even among 8-star celestial designer. To possess such skills at her age, it seemed like her title as the inceptive sage of the Celestial Designer Hall was not for show. "I'm done." After fixing the various spare parts together, the young lady heaved a sigh of relief before placing the item by the side. Following which, she stood up and said, "For the trial of the Tower of Master Teachers, you don't have to best me. All you need to do is display capability worthy of my recognition." This was not a celestial designer examination but a master teacher trial. As such, the requirement was not so demanding as to require the challenger to display skills surpassing that of the inceptive sage. However, I have very high expectations, so know that it won't be that easy to win my recognition. Of course, Zhongxian replied with a smile. There's no way it could be easy to win the recognition of someone who is capable of carving impeccably without drafting a blueprint beforehand. Usually, celestial designers would first draft a blueprint before carving the various parts of their artifact so that they would have a rough idea of the dimensions. However, the young lady was actually able to carve a spare part impeccably without any hesitation in her movement or referring to any blueprints. Putting aside the young lady's mastery as a celestial designer, just this feat in itself was sufficient to tell that she was a highly demanding person, possibly even a perfectionist. So, how could it possibly be easy to clear the trial of a person like that? It's good that you understand that. As you can see, I'm a very busy person, and I still have a lot of things to do, so let's not waste any more time. I have a pile of materials over here, and we will both carve a puppet based on this blueprint I have over here. As long as the puppet you have created is able to withstand 3 hits from mine, it will be your victory. As the young lady spoke, she flicked her hand, and a pile of materials, carving knives, and a blueprint materialized on the ground. The blueprint was filled with many intricate details and words. Without scanning it with one's spiritual perception, it would be impossible to interpret the microscopic words and details on the blueprint. Putting aside the drawings of the spare parts and their joints, just the sheer number of words on the blueprint totaled over several 10,000. How complex! Zhongxian frowned. He had seen plenty of grade 8 blueprints, but this was the first time that he had seen one that was this intricate. "This is the blueprint of the Xingyun puppet," the young lady said with a nod. "It's a grade 8 puppet, wielding strength comparable to a Grand Dominion Realm Master Teacher. The foundation of its design lies in the stellar sky. Every single one of its parts represents a star in the sky, and since there are countless stars in the sky, the number of parts it includes is innumerable as well. As such, even with the blueprint to refer to, it harnesses countless possibilities. The slightest difference in the carving of the part could result in a vast disparity in its final fighting prowess. At which point, the young lady lowered her head to glance at the blueprint before continuing on. "I should take roughly a day to finish carving this puppet. I'll give you 3 days after I'm done, and if you still haven't finished it by then, you will have failed my test. You should also know that time is one of the primary assessment criteria of a celestial designer's mastery, so 3 days is already the longest I can offer you." After the young lady was done with her explanation, she grabbed one of the materials on the ground and raised her head, preparing to begin her crafting. However, the next moment, she suddenly froze on the spot. Unbeknownst to her, the young man before her had conjured over 100 swords at some point in time, and every single one of them was busy carving a material with its sword chi. In less than 2 breaths, a large heap of parts of varying sizes had piled up before the young man. Then, the young man waved his hand. Voila! The freshly carved parts swiftly came together to form a puppet. "All right, I'm done," Zhong Xian said with a clap of his hand before raising his head to look at Jiang Feifei. Chapter 1408 I did go easy on her, you. Seeing the neatly assembled puppet standing right in front of her, Jiang Feifei was visibly stunned. Even with her fastest carving speed, she would still require an entire day at least, but how long did the other party take? 10 breaths. 8 breaths. How could he carve such delicate parts precisely while manipulating so many swords at once? That's not right. After a moment of shock, Jiang Feifei swiftly noticed something was amiss, and she asked in a deeply perplexed tone, "My puppet doesn't have any clothes, so how could yours be perfectly dressed?" Under normal circumstances, the Xingyun puppet should have been completely nude. Yet, the one carved by the young man before her was impeccably dressed. In fact, there was an ornament on its chest, and the ripples on its clothes flowed beautifully like real silk. This was completely at odds with the blueprint. I happened to have some additional time, and I thought that it would be inappropriate to display the body of a nude male puppet to a young lady like you, so I thought I would make a set of clothes for it. It doesn't look too bad, right? Zhong Xian replied with a gentlemanly smile. A puppet it might be, but it would have been severe breach of etiquette if he had allowed it to appear nude before a young lady. As a civilized gentleman, it went without saying that he could not allow something as indecent as that to happen. You even had time to make a set of clothes for it. Jiang Feifei's body froze in sheer astonishment. She slowly proceeded forward to take a closer look at the puppet that Zhong Xian had crafted. The puppet's clothes were in perfect harmony with its body. Every single stitch was done so impeccable that it was impossible to tell that it had been made with spare parts with one's eyes. In fact, even when she scanned the puppet's clothes with her spiritual perception, she could hardly tell the difference between them and real silk at all. How did you do it?" Jiang Feifei asked with eyes widened with shock. Her mind could hardly process what was going on. In terms of carving speed, she could be said to be at the forefront of 8-star celestial designers, but even so, it would still take her at least an entire day to finish carving the Xingyun puppet. On the other hand, the other party managed to complete it in just a few breaths, and to add insult to injury, its finish was actually far better than hers. What was with this monstrous ability? After looking at the blueprint, I thought that it would be too troublesome and time-consuming to use a carving knife, so I decided to use my swords instead. Fortunately, it seems to have worked out fine, Zhong Xian explained with a nod. For a celestial designer to carve swiftly, there were only 3 requirements that they would have to meet. First and foremost, they needed to have a sharp memory that would allow them to remember every single detail on the blueprint impeccably on command. Given that Zhong Xian possessed the Library of Heaven's Path, he could retrieve the details of the blueprints on command, so that was not a problem for him at all. Secondly, the celestial designer had to possess precise control over their movements and exertion of strength. The flowing water swordsmanship was known for its unparalleled defense, capable of even keeping the thinnest strand of spiritual perception at bay. As its practitioner, it went without saying that Zhong Xian possessed near absolute control over his swords. Thirdly, due to how precise and exhausting the job would be, one had to possess an exceptionally powerful soul and a sharp eye of discernment. As a soul oracle, there was no way the resilience of Zhong Xian's soul could possibly be lacking. As for eye of discernment, there was probably nothing in the world that could compete with the eye of insight. Since Zhong Xian had met all the criteria, it was a given that he would be able to carve swiftly. It's too early for you to celebrate. Just because you were able to carve your puppet so fast doesn't mean that it'll necessarily be strong, Jiang Feifei harumphed after hearing the explanation. Being capable of crafting a puppet fast was indeed a formidable skill, but more important than that was for the various parts to be aligned in a manner that did not differ too much from the blueprint. Otherwise, it would be nothing more than random parts connected together to form a figurine. There was no way it could exert the exceptional strength that the Xingyun puppet wielded. You don't have to worry about that. It would be a little troublesome and time-consuming to wait for you to craft a puppet, so why don't you suppress your cultivation to Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle and test its strength yourself? Zhong Xian asked. You are asking me to fight with your puppet personally? Jiang Feifei was taken aback by Zhong Xian's proposal. Had the other party gone mad? She was a Saint 7 Dan phantasmal space realm expert. Even if she suppressed her cultivation to Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion realm, the strength that she wielded would still be unmatched by any other Saint 6 Dan cultivators. Did the other party really think that a puppet he had crafted in just a few seconds would be able to match her? Just what in the world was he thinking? Noting the hesitation in Jiang Feifei's eyes, Zhong Xian quickly added with a smile, "Indeed. There's no need to worry. I'll make sure that it holds itself back properly so that it doesn't injure you by accident." You. Jiang Feifei nearly blew up on the spot. What she meant was that the puppet could not possibly be a match for her, but this fellow actually thought that she was worried about being injured by the puppet. His head was really in the clouds. Initially, she had still had a good impression of the other party for his courtesy of clothing his puppet, but in that instant, every shred of goodwill that she harbored for the other party had vanished without a trace. Very well. I'll suppress my cultivation and test your puppet out personally. I won't make things difficult for you either. As long as it's able to withstand 3 blows from me, you will have cleared my trial. Jiang Feifei harumphed coldly. She had no idea what the fighting prowess of the puppet that Zhong Xian had crafted would be, but it would have to be extremely resilient to be able to withstand 3 blows from her. If the other party's puppet was really that powerful, it would not be too much of a deal for her to acknowledge the other party. Great. Zhong Xian nodded. After which, he walked over to his puppet and whispered a few words into its ears in a hushed tone. Then, he nodded, and the puppet took a step forward and assessed the young lady before it sharply. Humph. Seeing that the other party was really so conceited as to have his puppet challenge her, Jiang Feifei harumphed coldly. She swiftly drove her zhenqi, and in the blink of an eye, her cultivation had already been suppressed down to Grand Dominion realm pinnacle. Who? Right after she had suppressed her cultivation, she immediately saw a fist flying straight for her face. The puppet had made its move. What? Jiang Feifei initially did not think that the puppet that had been crafted in a matter of seconds would be anything much, but the sheer might and speed of its punch left her face swiftly warping in astonishment. Despite being a phantasmal space realm pinnacle expert, she actually felt threatened by the puppet's offense. She hurriedly raised both of her hands to fend off the puppet's punch. Peng! The palm and the fist collided, and a crushing shockwave rippled into the surroundings. Before Jiang Feifei could even react, she was flying backward at a furious speed as if a kicked ball. Pu. Her back crashed heavily into the wall, and crimson blood spewed from her mouth. It was fortunate that she had released the seal that she had placed on her cultivation at the very last moment, or else the entire wall could have been knocked down. You have lost. Before Jiang Feifei could say a word, the puppet before her waved its hands with a forlorn expression, as if deeply regretting the fact that it had been born with such great strength that it would never be able to find a proper opponent. You are able to speak. Jiang Feifei widened her eyes in disbelief. Without a doubt, the Xingyun puppet was indeed very powerful, but it should not have been capable of speech. Yet, the one that the other party had crafted had actually begun speaking human speech. What the heck was going on? There was a huge difference in a puppet that was unable to speak and one that was able to speak. I had some time after assembling it, so I enchanted it while I was at it, Zhong Xian explained. Jiang Feifei. It took her some time before she was able to steady her breathing once more. In less than 10 seconds, not only did you manage to carve the puppet, you were even able to make some clothes for it and enchant it. Even with speed like hers, 10 breaths would only be sufficient for her to carve 2 parts, and the puppet standing before her had to have tens of thousands of parts. Was this not a little too exaggerated? Yes. I am the inceptive sage of the Spirit Awakener Guild, so I'm able to conduct spirit enchantment quite quickly, Zhong Xian explained. So, have I cleared your assessment yet? Of course, Jiang Feifei replied with a bitter look on her face. She had thought that it would take a miracle for the puppet to be able to withstand 3 blows from her, but contrary to her expectations, she did not even manage to withstand a single strike from the puppet. There were no words that could describe how stifled she felt at that very moment. But unbeknownst to her, the worst was yet to come. Just as the other party was about to make his way up to the next floor, he suddenly halted his footsteps and glanced at the puppet that he had crafted with a disapproving look. "Didn't I tell you to go easy on her? Why didn't you heed my instruction?" "I did go easy on her. I really did. How was I to know that she would be so weak as to be unable to withstand even a single punch of mine?" the puppet cried in indignation. Jiang Feifei nearly clawed her hair out. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.